welcome to the Horror Hangout, a podcast where film fans watch the best and worst horror movies of all time and talk about them. My name is Ben Errington, and I'm joined by a very, very special returning guest. He's a friend of the show, writer of weird horror and sci-fi, and an all-round lovely man. Please welcome John Crinan.
Hello, thank you for having me. Thank you for the intro as
Whoa.
well. It's very
That's
nice
no
to be
problem.
back. How long ago
Uh,
was The Changeling? What feels like a lifetime, but it might not have been.
That's a good question.
Yeah,
Like
no, I'm putting
maybe
you on the
like
spot.
March 2022, possibly.
Okay. Oh, it was a while
Yeah.
ago then.
It
Yeah.
was a little while ago, yeah.
Yeah.
And that goes down as one of my favorite episodes in recent memory. Sorry, Andy Conduit Turner. Because I feel like it was one of the most I think we got to the crux of the movie better than any other movie. Sure, we had fun, sure we had some laughs and jokes, but I feel like in terms of like a piece of horror journalism,
Gosh.
if anybody said to me, "Listen, what's your best piece of horror journalism you ever done?" I'd say, "Thanks for asking." But also, listen to this listen to this episode of me and John Crinn talking about the Changeling for 2 hours.
My goodness, that is high praise. It was a lot of fun. I remember it, and I love the movie. And I remember on a few occasions hearing you talk about it and it like reframing some of the things that I was thinking about, whatever scene we were talking about at the time.
Mm.
Um, but but my overwhelming response to that praise is
Oh.
pressure because we've got a lot to live up to now.
Yeah, we have. We got absolutely loads to live up to. Also, no Andy Conduit Turner, as maybe previously advertised. I think in the previous episode we may have said he's in Las Vegas. Who knows what he's doing there? Gambling his life away. That's all right. No, he hasn't got an addiction. He's there for work reasons. He was due to join us on the show live from Las Vegas, almost like Ghostwatch has got a American correspondent coming in live via satellite.
Oh,
We were
yes.
going to have Andy Conduit Turner. However, he's feeling, I don't know, bit jet lagged, bit tired.
I
It's
mean,
11 a.m., maybe 12 a.m. 12
we got a
mid-afternoon.
lucky little glimpse of Andy. He did join us before we started recording just to say hello, and it was very lovely to see him. But yeah, he must be very, very tired after the flight, and his
Yeah, I
hotel room
don't
looks
blame it. I
amazing.
mean, sometimes his hotel room does look amazing. He's living a life of luxury, not based on his role as a podcast host. Unfortunately, we can't expenses. We haven't got. Let's send you out to Vegas as a correspondent. So yeah, it was lovely to see him, but he's gonna take a week off. Don't blame him. We can carry on. We can hold the fort down not better than him, as well as him. That's what I meant. God.
I'm very happy to be here to assist and to play my part. It's good.
Yes. And
I'm
this is
not just
a
a patron against my will or whatever it is that you say.
You're not just a patron against your will, you're also a co-host against your will. I forced you to come on today. I've gone, listen, if you don't come on, I'll
Look,
badmouth you on the internet
yeah,
until the cows come home.
look at these plain walls. This is a prison that I am in. It's a
Yeah.
box that Ben has put me in.
Yeah. It's just my spare room. That's all it is.
Yeah.
And sometimes I let you out, but very only occasionally. But most of the time I just Zoom call you to see if you're okay.
Yeah. Any banging that you hear through Ben's microphone is not pipes. It's actually me trying to get out
Help
of
me.
this box.
Get me
Oh,
out.
that was good.
Pipes. So this is, I guess, kind of like the Halloween special because this is going out Halloween week, which is exciting. But not only is it a Halloween special, but it's 30 years almost to the day that Ghostwatch first broadcast back in 1992, so on Halloween night as well. So if we were smarter with this, maybe we'd have put it out on Halloween night and gone, this is the 30th anniversary, but maybe it's gone out slightly earlier. Just listen to it on Halloween night.
Yeah, there's some fun stuff coming. Can I talk about the film? No, maybe I shouldn't talk about the film yet. But there's some fun stuff coming in Ghostwatch land from like various retailers and things like that. I don't know if you've heard about that, but we're
Oh,
maybe getting a little
okay,
bit ahead of
okay.
ourselves. I got a dispatch notification just this morning for my new Blu-ray
Ah,
of the film.
yeah, because I think that's where me and you sorry, I think that's where me and you first started discussing Ghostwatch, was when maybe you or me shared the image of the Blu-ray,
Yeah.
and then I think we talked about it, and then and I think it was then we said, let's maybe do an episode on it. Yeah, a lot of love for Ghostwatch. I think there was a screening of it at Celluloid Screams as well. Was that right? I don't know if
Hmm.
I've got that completely wrong. Is that right?
Yeah,
And the Go, Ghostwatch van was there.
that's exactly what I was about to say. I follow a few people who were at it, and
Yeah.
they posted some photos, and the Ghostwatch van was there, and there was some like folk
Oh
walking
man.
around in the Ghostwatch crew T-shirts and stuff like that, and also some
So
of
cool.
the cast and crew were there. It would have been a great event to go to, but I couldn't make it, unfortunately.
Yeah. You did go to a horror festival fairly recently, didn't you? Horror
I
film
did.
festival.
I went to Dead Northern,
Hmm.
which was absolutely awesome. I had the best time at Dead Northern. I saw, oh goodness, I'm going to forget some of the things that I saw, but I saw so many great movies. It was basically 3 days of just horror features and shorts. I went there with my writing partner and best pal Hannah Mariska, and we hung out and we drunk wine and watched loads of horror movies and met up with talking about cast and crew. Like there was so many directors and stars,
Oh
and
wow.
goodness, I could say. I mean, the one that's jumping out at me as probably one of my favorites, favorite movies of that. Actually, there was two. Oh gosh, there was a couple, but I'll forget. I'll forget tons of them because I think I watched. I think I counted them at the time. I watched 8 features and something like 20 short films over the course of my time there. I only missed one feature because I can't remember. I think I needed to eat at that point because it had been a few days. But I saw a movie called The Group, which I would highly recommend to everyone. I don't know how much to say about each of these movies,
Hmm.
but The Group is essentially a kind of it feels like a piece of theater put up on the screen. It takes place really over kind of 90 minutes in real time inside a sort of Alcoholics Anonymous type setup. Everyone's sitting in a circle, and then an interesting character sort of
Hmm.
joins the group, and things
I
go south for a lot of people.
believe we saw that for Fright Fest.
It
Yeah.
could have been, yeah. There was a few movies
Yeah.
from Fright Fest, which I wasn't at Fright Fest this year, but there was
Hmm.
definitely a few movies that had their premiere at Fright Fest that then their second screenings were at Dead Northern. And the next film I'm
Ah,
going to
okay.
say, I think that was true of. It was Eating Miss Campbell, which was
Oh
also at
yeah.
Fright Fest, I believe, and I saw that and I just loved it so much. Yeah. I don't have enough good things to say about
Oh,
or
amazing.
Eating Miss Campbell. And then there was another film which was kind of a bit quieter, like I hadn't heard of at all. I just recently finished a D&D campaign, as some of the Hawk and Cleaver fans and listeners might know. There was the Monsters and Madness podcast, which I was part of, along with Andy Conduit Turner. A little shout out for that podcast, which has just
Hmm.
finished up recently. Anyway, there was a film about uh, a Dungeons and Dragons game played across Zoom, called Shadow
Oh.
Vaults,
Oh wow. Okay.
and it was
That's an interesting concept.
insanely effective horror movie. I really, really loved it. I think that was on day one, and from the moment the credits rolled, I thought this is going to be tough to beat. It's I don't want to talk too much about it, but it really is. We obviously had Host, which was the big Zoom horror,
Hmm.
but Host had a lot of I loved Host a lot, but it had a lot of special effects and like things happening and people running around. Shadow Vaults is very stationary. It really does feel like you are just watching a Zoom call. There's not a lot of flare and flashy stuff happening. It's really just people talking, but
Hmm.
goodness, it's scary and
Oh
super
wow. Okay.
effective. I hope a lot of people see that because it wasn't one that I had heard of before, and I haven't heard a whole lot about like it getting
No,
released. I don't know what the
I've
situation
not
is
heard
with
much
that
about
movie.
that at all.
Yeah, and a couple of short films as well. I could talk about Dead Northern a lot, and yeah, I've probably been talking about it too much already. But yeah, I went to that recently.
And that's a yearly event as well, right? Yeah, that's
Yeah,
always
yeah.
happens.
A
Okay, so
hundred
maybe
percent I'll be
the
going back. It was my first time there. I actually found out about Dead Northern at ChillerCon this year, which was another event that I was at, which is actually going to come up later because there's a little Ghostwatch thing about ChillerCon that I'll mention.
mm,
Um, and I met some of the guys there. They were repping Trauma at the time. They were at the Trauma stand at ChillerCon, and I'm a big Trauma fan. Actually, Eating Miss Campbell is a Trauma movie. And they told me about Dead Northern. They were going to be there with their next movie, so I saw that and met up with them for a couple of drinks. That movie was called Calling Nurse Meow. There's a photo on my Instagram of me with the star Nurse Meow having a drink, and yeah, I met them at ChillerCon and we're pals, along with Joe Cash, the director, and they're doing loads of fun stuff. So it's been a fun year for big events and horror stuff.
Yeah. Maybe we need to cover Dead Northern as well. It does sound like a good time.
Yeah.
Sounds like you had a good time. What are your plans for Halloween weekend / Halloween day, night?
Oh gosh, I'm going to be so boring because I don't really have big.
Never on that.
I don't really have big plans this year. So it's interesting that we are talking about this movie today on this episode, because Ghostwatch is actually my Halloween movie. I think I maybe said that earlier.
I think we've discussed this. Yeah, I think maybe we've discussed this like at some point.
I watch it every Halloween night, and normally I save it. So I watch the film once a year, and it's on Halloween, and it's around about the time that it was broadcast. I normally try. I'm that guy. I try and start it around about 9 p.m. and watch it on Halloween night. So I had to watch it early this year, which is no bad thing because I love it. Well, maybe I'm spoiling it by saying, I'm a fan of this movie, obviously, but I will probably just watch Ghostwatch again for the second time.
Yeah, it's definitely got
wines, and that's it.
It's definitely got rewatch value, especially when. Again, I'm not going to spoil anything, so we'll discuss that at some point. So I kind of remember seeing it. Actually, I'm jumping ahead of myself. We'll talk about our history with the film as well.
Well, we haven't heard what your Halloween plans are either.
I mean, I'm not doing all that much on Halloween night. I mean, the weekend before is Forbidden Worlds Film Festival, so I'm going to a screening of Elvira, Mistress of the Dark on Friday.
Excellent.
And then I'm going to sorry, incorrect information. I'm going to a screening of Evil Dead 2 on Friday. Beautiful. And then I'm going to a screening of Elvira, Mistress of the Dark on Saturday.
I have a question.
Yes,
I'm not 100% sure, but is this the festival where they are screening The Boxer's Omen?
Yes. That is being shown on the Sunday. So yeah,
anyone who's listening to this, I don't know if you're going to see it. I am so insanely jealous of anyone who sees The Boxer's Omen on the big screen. I desperately want to see it on the big screen, but I cannot justify traveling to the other side of to the other end of the country to watch it. But oh my gosh. Yeah, whoever's in attendance is so lucky. That film is wild.
So I was kind of planning to get a full weekend ticket, but unfortunately, it didn't look like I could be available for the entire weekend. So yeah, The Boxer's Omen is being shown on the Sunday. Obviously, I did an interview with the organizers of the Forbidden Worlds Film Festival, which is just on our standard podcast feeds as well. So that's what I'll be doing. But then the week after that, I thought I'd bring this up because this sounds interesting. At Curzon Cinema, Clevedon, they're doing a screening of The Fog, an immersive experience. So I mean, without even looking at the information, I feel like what's going to happen is as soon as The Fog rolls in, they're going to get a fog. They're going to pump a fog machine into the cinema, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
Yes, they are. And I'm like, I can't imagine anything better than that. I mean, it's not on Halloween weekend; it's the week after. It's like the 4th of November. But I was like, we have to. And then after that, there's a DJ set with DJ Chiba, with a remix of the film's iconic soundtrack. He's going to be spinning.
That sounds fun. I love it.
It does sound fun. It sounds like perfect Halloween night stuff, but obviously the week after is still fine. I'll still be fully in the Halloween vibes. I'm not going to be in Christmas mode until.
I don't think any of my local cinemas are showing anything Halloweeny. And they probably are. I need to have my ear a little bit closer to the ground. I think I've been a little bit distant this month for whatever reason.
Yeah.
I have been. We were talking a little bit about what we've been watching, and I haven't spoken about. I kind of spoke about Dead Northern, which was a while ago. But I aim to watch as many horror movies as possible in October,
Hmm.
sometimes as many as one a day, so that would be 31. I
Wow.
think at last count, I've managed 5 this month. So
Okay.
I'm really,
Okay.
really failing at this challenge.
5 is better than 0. You know,
It's
if you
better than
turned around
zero.
and said, I've watched absolutely 0 horror movies. All I've watched are those made-for-TV romantic Christmas movies, where all the all the stories are the same. No, 5's more than respectable. I don't know how many I've watched actually. I've not been exclusively watching horror, but I think it's kind of like my default now, and I guess that's just because hosting a horror podcast, you kind of feel like you want your finger to be on the pulse. But I feel like it is my default. It's like, what are we gonna watch? A horror movie? Oh, maybe something else. I don't know. Um,
I'm the same.
so
Yeah.
yeah, it's the default, isn't it? It's the default setting for me.
It's
The
it's
default setting.
it's our genre, so and there's so much coming out. I really think we're
Yeah,
living in a sort of golden age or a
yeah,
golden year. Like there has been so many releases this year. I am so desperately behind. Like there's so many that I haven't seen yet, but I see the trailers come out. I see the posters. I hear about them and I want to watch them. There's all the TV as well. Like there's the Midnight Club on Netflix. I haven't got to that yet.
yeah.
I'm so hopelessly behind, Ben.
It's difficult, as we often say on this podcast. Content is infinite, and and well, not completely infinite, but you're never gonna complete horror. There's just too much out there, and it is hard to keep up with it. Like sometimes I'm like, okay, I've got like a list of fairly new releases I need to work my way through, and it's tough. It's tough finding the time. Couple of bits of horror news I wanted to mention before we sort of go into talking about Ghostwatch today. So, The Conjuring 4 is officially in development with returning filmmaking team. I know they're making the Nun 2 at the moment. Uh, so yeah, this is the 4th Conjuring with the Warrens case files. Plot details of which case file remain under wraps, but obviously the last movie, The Devil Made Me Do It, was all right, but they're going to keep making Conjuring films because it made $2 billion worldwide. The last one, so not going to go. We've had enough of Conjuring films. You know what? We should just knock them on the head. No, $2 billion says keep it going. Yeah. Did you watch The
Uh,
Devil Made Me Do It? The last
no,
Conjuring 3?
I've
No.
just been listening. I've been listening to you talk about Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, and The Nun. I've
Yeah.
seen none of those
Okay.
series.
Well, the nun, the nun's not very good. I don't know how. Again, I think that's only got a sequel because I think critically it was panned, but it's got a sequel because it made a lot of money, and I feel like it's just one of these brands of horror movies, and I kind of feel the same with Smile, which came out recently. Which it's gonna do the numbers, it's gonna make the money because it's jump scares aplenty, and it sells. It does sell, and the more
Yeah,
highbrow horror stuff, people go into it expecting that. I think that this is the thing. I think me and Andy have spoken about it before. I feel like there are a few different modern horror audiences. You can't just put everybody into a box of they like horror films. You've got a few different types of horror fan, and some people just go into movies wanting these big loud noises and jump scares, and if they don't get that, they feel that they're hard done by. So
yeah, I've often called myself on like previous podcasts. I definitely said this a lot on a podcast that I used to do with my good pal Zobo with a shotgun called An Ice Chianti. We were on this show actually as that.
Mhm.
Um, which I often refer to myself as a fairly bad horror fan because I don't typically watch modern horror.
Mm.
I've just said it's a golden age, but all those titles that you just listed, I haven't watched any of them, and a lot of the big franchises. I'm not super interested in. That's maybe a
Yeah,
bad thing to say. Maybe there's some gems in there, but I'm definitely, when it comes to my horror taste, they lean more in the classic horrors,
yeah,
and that's the stuff that I watch. And
classics,
honestly,
cult classics. I'd say you
yeah.
view a bit more as well. And there's plenty of stuff that you've put out there on your social media, and I've gone, I've never heard of that, but I'm interested because John's told me it's good.
Well, I mean, don't always listen to my tastes are questionable at best, but
Eclectic.
eclectic, yes. Okay, let's go with that. Yeah, oh yeah, maybe not questionable. That's not a good word to use nowadays. But yeah, I tend to watch classic stuff, and once you start branching out a little bit, there's all the classic cult movies that we all know and love. But once you start looking out to world classic horror cinema. You find all these little cubby holes of like interesting filmmakers and stuff like that, and there's just so much. There's just as much behind us as there is like well, that's obviously not true, but you know what I mean. Like all this new films coming out now,
Yeah.
just a glut of them. There's so many.
Yeah.
But once you start scratching the surface of classic horror, it's not just all those big names that everyone's heard of. There's a wealth, a
Mm.
treasure trove of amazing,
Treasure trove.
forgotten gems that are just that I think I'll just spend the rest of my life
Yeah.
working through.
I think this is the reason why I'm always willing to fight the corner of horror because some people go, I don't like horror films. It's like, well, by saying you don't like horror films, it's almost like you saying I don't like music. Because it's like, well, I mean, there's bound to be some type of music that you enjoy. Like, there's horror is such a diverse genre with so many different paths to go down. If you don't like spooky stuff with ghosts, or found footage, then there's another 50 sort of subgenres you can dip your toes into.
Yeah. I mean,
It's good
like
times.
it's very, very good times. And then also, someone smarter than me said, "Oh, the first stories were horror stories. The first stories that we told around the fire
Mm,
were things that are out in the darkness and what you need to be scared of." It's like horror is in all stories. I would say someone who says that they don't like horror films is sort of saying they don't like films in a way. But
yeah,
yeah. But I mean, we're preaching to the choir maybe because the
yeah. We're
people who are
preaching to
listening
the
to this
choir.
are already on board.
If you
But
listen to this podcast and you don't like horror films, what are you doing here? All right, what are you doing here? I'm joking, of course. Everybody's welcome at all times. This is a safe space, as I've said many times. The other bits of news, we've got some like gaming news from this week. I don't know if you've seen anything
Oh,
that's been
yes, I know what you're
announced.
going to say, I think.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So last week was prior to this big glut of announcements. So we knew that Konami was going to do a big Silent Hill announcement on last Wednesday, I believe, and we'd recorded our episode just before that, and we were kind of talking about what we think it could be. And not only is it a new game, it's a new movie. It's a remake of one of the most popular games in the franchise, and like what seems to be a new possible um experience. I don't really know what that meant. It was a bit like some sort of media experience, whether it's a interactive game or something like that. I'm probably wording it all wrong. However, so Silent Hill 2, number one, is being remade and is being brought out on like PS5 and PC and everything next year. They're including classic soundtrack artist Akira Yamaoka and also creature designer Masahiro Ito. So, it's gonna have a lot of the classic look and feel and sound of the original game. And we got a nice little trailer as well, which looks incredible. Looks like they've kept a lot of original um stuff, but again, like these remakes are similar to the way the Resident Evil remakes are. It's the perfect balance of new and old. It seems like,
Mm.
sure, the visuals have been upgraded, but they've kind of really gone to keep the same sort of atmosphere. And the gameplay is a little bit more polished, but and then also there's going to be Silent Hill Townfall, which is being a new game being developed. I don't think we really found out much about what kind of game that would be. And then another game called Silent Hill Ascension. See, this is the thing. We went into it going, is there going to be a new game announced? And they went, have all this, have all this. A new game, a live real-time interactive series. So maybe like
Oh,
maybe like a live real-time interactive series. So yeah, difficult to know what that really means. But Silent Hill F as well, which I think is set in 1960s Japan in an abandoned Japanese village. It looks incredibly creepy. And then also a new movie, which is going to be called Return to Silent Hill, which is directed by the director of the first movie, Christoph Gans. So there's a lot of stuff there. Are you a fan
oof.
of Silent Hill, the franchise, games or movies or anything? Or
So I I watched my when Silent Hill 2 was out on, I guess it was PlayStation 2. Was that what the original console it came out on? I remember
yeah,
sitting in the living room with my flatmate watching him play it. and being kind of
Yeah.
creeped out. I hadn't played the first one, and I didn't play that series at all, but I appreciated it from afar. I have a question about the game actually.
Mhm.
Can you, because if this is coming out, because I would be interested to play some of these games. Do you think I need to have played Silent Hill 1 to enjoy the remaster of Silent Hill 2?
Probably. I mean, probably not. I mean, it establishes a lot of the rules of the universe, and what Silent Hill is, and that. But I think Silent Hill 2 is like a standalone, self-contained story about a certain character and their story.
Okay.
So I'd say no. Silent Hill 1. I think that's why they haven't remade Silent Hill 1, is because even though Silent Hill 1 is an amazing game, perhaps the story isn't as there's not more that they can do with that story. I guess it's just a man trying to find his daughter, whereas this one is about guilt and suicide and loads of things that are sort of visually represented. So I would say no. I'd say you probably can just play Silent Hill 2.
Yeah, well, I mean, in that case, I'm interested. I actually hadn't read the post or the announcement, sorry, as closely as I thought I had, because I hadn't heard of some of those titles. I didn't realize there was quite so many games coming, but I'd heard
Yeah.
about Silent Hill 2 remaster, and I'm interested. You also asked me about the film. I'm I actually I don't know what the general consensus is on the Silent Hill film. I feel like people don't like it. I liked it.
Yep. I'm
I'm
with
a
you.
fan.
I'm with you. I liked it. I did watch Silent Hill Revelation this week. We'll get onto that when I say about what I've been watching, just to refresh the old memory. But yeah, I think the original film is probably the best example of video game to movie adaptation in terms of just capturing what that game is. It's
Okay.
because it's got like the same music. It looks the same. The performances are a bit clunky, but it kind of goes hand in hand with what the performances of the game are like. Obviously, now this is going to be a huge sort of AAA title, so the performances are going to be better. But I'm incredibly excited, and yeah, something like a interactive experience, I guess. Like, do you know the games with like that? It's just like full motion video games.
Mm.
Maybe it's a bit like that, where you have to make the decisions and they
That was where
affect.
my head went as well, but
Hmm.
yeah, I guess there's a little bit of a resurgence of those coming back now because we've got, is it Ghosts?
Ghost, Jed
Yeah,
Shepherd,
with Jed
yes.
Shepard's game. Yeah, so maybe
Yeah,
they're getting in on that. I don't know. Yeah,
yeah.
intriguing.
I'm up for a resurgence of that because you know what, certain things like Heavy Rain or even The Quarry to a degree are kind of like decision based games, aren't they? I mean, there's a bit more exploration with it, but they're very story driven.
Mm.
I'm thinking of another one. I can't remember what the other one is with the killer. Yeah, but they're also like story based games where the decisions of you impact the story and the characters and what characters survive. So it's kind of just taking a step back, and I think it's good. I like it. Um, so
Yeah.
yeah, loads of silent. I mean, as I think we mentioned last week, Silent Hill fans have probably felt like the black sheep of the survival horror franchise fans for a while because there's not been anything new. And then we've got Alan Wake remake, Dead Space remake, a brand new game called the Callisto Protocol. Resident Evil is releasing remake after remake after remake. So Silent Hill probably felt like, when can I have something? Just give me a little bit of something. They've gone, have all this down your neck, all of this stuff.
They've been
And
saving it up. Yeah, I'll
they've
be
been
there for
saving it
Silent
up.
Hill 2. I'll pick it up.
Yeah. And there was another trailer for the Resident Evil 4 remake as well, which I think had like the first gameplay footage. So this is obviously a very, very different experience because this was the first time that the Resident Evil franchise, especially the main installments of the numbered installments of the Resident Evil franchise, the first time it kind of went action, a bit more
Mm.
action orientated. But yeah, it looks like they've remade some of the actual moments from the game one for one, and it looks pretty incredible. So survival horror gaming fans are eating good right now. It's like
It's a
it's a
golden age.
it is a golden age, it is a golden age because you're never more than like a few weeks away from something awesome just being dropped in your lap. uh it's it is a golden age. We're lucky, you know. People are all for nostalgia. People are nostalgia hounds. Oh, I want as good back then. I want as good back then. It's a good time to be alive right now. There's a lot of shit going on, but at the same time, new games and stuff.
It's a good time to be a horror fan because, as horror fans, especially lifelong horror fans, I am of a certain age now, very late 30s, where I've sort of been a horror fan for a long time, and we struggle. Like, it's peaks and troughs. We there are some times where there's really not a lot.
Mm.
There's not a lot to offer, and it's kind of difficult to be a horror
Or
fan
or you end up
sometimes.
you're in the middle of a horror craze that you're not quite into. You know, like I'm just thinking torture porn of the mid 2000s. You know, all the hostels and everything. That wasn't always for me. I felt a
Yeah.
little bit alienated. Like, oh, this doesn't feel quite right for me. Well, that's been and gone, and now maybe I look back at it fonder than I did when I was actually when all those films were actually coming out. So yeah.
Yeah, we should be very grateful for what's coming out, and I should get off my arse more and get out and see some of these films. I did my I did my work with Dead Northern, and like I saw a lot, but there's
You
more.
did,
There's always more.
but you're making something yourself, right?
Oh gosh, yes, I am. I'm trying to. This is one of the reasons why or one of the reasons I am a horror fan first and foremost. So I wanted to go and see these films. But
Mm.
Dead Northern also gave me the opportunity to speak to some filmmakers, and I am trying to, or I guess I'm not trying to. We are doing. Right
Mm.
now. I am shooting a short film. My lead actor is in Canada right now, so I'm waiting for him to come back so we can pick it up again. But it actually works out for the best because we need the dark nights. We need kind of longer nights so that we can shoot because it's all at night. And yeah, I have a little short film that's fun, and there's not many details out yet, so I'll be cagey about
Okay.
the description. But yeah, I mean, I'm trying. I'm trying it out, and it's really going well, and I'm excited about some of the stuff that are coming out. And this is sort of my move towards filmmaking, which is something that I have been putting off unintentionally for a long time. People will know that I write and do various other things with podcasting, but filmmaking and film has always been my dream. And I think it was from, lockdown and the events, the world events of the last couple of years have made me very impatient to chase all my
Mm.
my dreams now, and that's exactly what I'm doing. So we're starting small with a short, but hopefully we'll go further. We'll see.
Very, very exciting. How are you finding the process of it so far then?
It's intimidating, but a lot of fun. There's a lot to learn, especially when you're, sort of very, very kind of fiercely indie and have a
Mm.
very small crew. I am very lucky to be surrounded by some very talented friends and people that I can call on. I have, things like actor friends. I have editors. I have musicians. I have a composer for the score already. I have a lead. I have my lead actor. I have a lot of different things. But I'm also, doing this for zero money and just trying to make it work and trying to learn all the technical details of lenses and whatever else, 3-point lighting and stuff like that. It's fun because I want to learn all this stuff, but it's also there's a lot. You can visualize something
Mm.
and trying to get it up on the screen. There's actually quite a lot of work that goes into it. Who would have thought? But I've also been very pleasantly surprised by
Mm.
how good some of the stuff we've done has come out.
Oh
I
wow, okay.
also like practical effects, and I've been playing around with building my own practical effects. And I did one practical effect that I built myself and sent it
No way.
to
Okay.
sent a video to a good friend who I perhaps should have been a little bit more cautious about it because I forgot that she wasn't great with the sight of blood.
Oh
And
shit.
she had to sit down after she watched my
Oh god.
practical effect. So that was
Ooh.
very validating.
If anything, that shows you that it was good, right? That shows you that
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
effective.
that
There we
validated it
go.
big time. So yeah, it's
Can
fun. It's fun. And
can you give
I'll
us
have a lot more. say about it. Yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I was just going to say, can you give us any more details about it? But then you said that you will have a lot more to say.
Yeah, it's yeah, I'll hold back just for just now. Anyone who's looking on anyone who's looking at my Instagram, because I posted a couple of behind the scenes photos from our early test shoot, which was a couple of
Yes.
months ago now, will know and be able to see that it does involve a garden shed.
Yeah.
But that's about all that's been publicly said so far. But I pitched it to a few of the filmmakers and people at Dead Northern that I sat and had a drink with, and everyone was pretty excited about the idea. So
Oh, sweet.
hopefully it'll be a winner.
I'm incredibly excited. Looking forward to finding out
Oh,
more about
cheers,
that.
dude. Cheers, I
Definitely.
appreciate it.
Okay, so next up is what we've been watching. I guess we've already covered a bit of that in Dead Northern, but is there anything in the last, I was going to say 7 days, but obviously you said you've watched 5 movies in October. Any of those you're willing to talk about or got
I,
much to say about?
I would happily mention them all. Well, apart from the film that we're talking about here, I watched Werewolf by Night, which
Hmm.
I'll go through them relatively quickly because I spoke so much about Dead Northern. I dug it, but I don't know if it exactly went in the direction that I wanted. And also, I came to Werewolf by Night having already heard a lot of the hype. A lot of people were really loving it, and I think maybe my expectations were just a fraction too high. But I
Yeah.
enjoyed it, and I don't want to, it was good. It was good. I also went to a screening of Bram Stoker's Dracula, the Coppola film, which is
Wow.
just
Okay.
incredible. I mean, anyone who's seen that will know it's one of the most visually interesting movies I can think of. Honestly,
Mm.
definitely one of the most visually interesting horror movies. Um, I also watched my best friend's Exorcism. I have not read the book.
Mm.
Unfortunately, the film didn't fully work for me, so that's all I'll say about that. I rewatched
Yeah.
Basket Case, the Frank Henenlotter classic, which is one of my
Yep.
my faves. And I also watched Rob Zombie's The Munsters because I was just insanely curious
Yeah.
about that film. And it's dividing opinion. I loved it. I
Okay.
think it's great.
Okay.
So that's my 5 that I've watched apart
I've not seen it yet. If you're going to recommend anything, then would you say Monsters?
from that list. Well,
Mm.
just because it's new, yeah. I mean, yeah. I think we should all be out there watching the monsters and supporting Rob Zombie's crazy visions. I
Yeah.
am a big Rob Zombie fan. I do not stand by all his films. I'm not that guy. Um, my favorite still remains House of a Thousand Corpses, but
Yeah.
the monsters is a lot of fun. I thought it was great.
Okay. Okay. I've still got it on my list to get around to watching in October. We're running out of days in October so
Yeah.
far, so I will need to get around to it. I've only seen a few things this week, so I watched Smoke and Mirrors, the story of Tom Savini documentary.
Oh yeah.
Um, that was good. It was a pretty standard affair in terms of a documentary. It was the life and times of a groundbreaking horror legend. Obviously, his makeup and effects like set the bar, I guess. But in a certain era, didn't know he went to war in Vietnam now. So that was interesting to find out. I first saw Tom Savini with his crotch gun in From Dusk Till Dawn, and I had no idea who he was. When I watched it in the '90s, I was just like, "Who's this guy with his crotch gun?" And obviously, as I became more of a horror fan, as I got older, I realized, he's a big deal. I watched, obviously, I mentioned Silent Hill already. I watched Silent Hill Revelation, Revelation 3D, it says here, but I didn't watch it in 3D. And obviously, as I seriously am a big fan of the first movie, I can't believe how disappointing this film is. It's just so lame. It reminds me of the worst of the Resident Evil movie adaptations, to the point where I'm almost like I'd probably rather watch some of those. It just looks cheap. Performances are bad. Jon Snow's in it. What's his name? Kit
Harrington.
Kit Harington. He's in it. Carrie Ann Moss is in it. Sean Bean's in it. Some heavy hitters. Everyone sucks, unfortunately.
Oh,
Everyone's
no.
Sean Bean. Sean Bean's doing an American accent. I'm like, he could do an American accent in the first Silent Hill. I swear. This time around is like he is just the Yorkshires slipping through. It's just really dull. And as a film, it kind of feels like it's kind of like the story of Silent Hill 3 with a bit of Silent Hill 2, but it's one of those films where every scene the characters are telling you what's happening, just one of those films where you're just like, all right. okay, we get it. So yeah, didn't enjoy that. Probably will never watch that again. It's just because I couldn't remember what it was like. Really, I was like, I'll give it another chance. I'm all hyped for Silent Hill. And then this week I also watched VHS 99, which is now streaming on Shudder. I found this installment a bit jarring, and maybe VHS 94, the last installment, I found it a lot consistently pretty good. This one, I probably only one or two of the segments I'd say were worthy watches.
Yep.
There's a section called Shredding, which is about like this all-girl punk band who die, and then they get like trampled by a crowd in like an underground venue, and then years later some kids go down there to try and summon their spirits. That was really good. And also To Hell and Back by the Winters, who also directed Deadstream, which we mentioned
Oh,
over the last couple of weeks. That was really good. Just like two guys get accidentally sent to hell during exorcism slash maybe not exorcism, but like a demonic ritual, and then are trying to get back from hell. And some really gruesome practical effects. And just yeah, it's just good. But there were a couple of segments where I was a bit like, not so much, not so into them, and also like the wraparound story wasn't as interesting as maybe like it has been on previous installments. It was good though, it was a good watch, and I think this is a good sort of like Halloween time of the year watch as well. I do love an anthology.
yeah, both that and Deadstream are on my list to watch very soon, so I'll be
Yeah,
checking out both of those.
Deadstream's great, and if you like Deadstream, you're definitely like To Hell and Back from VHS 99 as well. It's got the same sort of vibe, and just a really like engaging brand of comedy as well. Like sometimes these found footage films try to be funny, and you're a bit like, all right, yeah, all right. This is genuinely like, yeah, that's funny. Yeah, I'm cracking up. This is very silly, but silly but still scary, which is a very very difficult balance at
Yeah,
all times.
big time.
Um, but yeah, that's all I've watched apart from the film of the week as well.
I mean, I think we've covered quite a bit with our films and with Dead Northern and stuff like that. I think yeah, but there's a
Mm,
couple there that you watched that I definitely want to, and yeah, I would recommend The Monsters for you.
yeah, I've got to check out
I
the
think we can
monsters.
squeeze in some more this month before we're out, so it's good.
Yeah, well, essentially only one more week, so let's get as many watches as possible. Okay, so the film of the week is Ghostwatch, which is a British reality horror pseudo-documentary television film, first broadcast on BBC One on Halloween night 1992. It's written by Stephen Volk, directed by Lesley Manning. The drama was produced as the part of a BBC anthology series called Screen One, by Richard Broke. So, despite having been recorded weeks in advance, the narrative was presented as live television, and during and following its first and only UK television broadcast, the show attracted a considerable amount of furor, resulting in an estimated 1 million phone call inquiries to the BBC switchboard on the night of broadcast, comprising of a mixture of complaints and praise. I reckon mainly complaints for the program's unique presentation. Apparently, it's never been repeated on UK television because of
Mm.
the event that happened. I think it's been shown on some. I think it was on Shudder briefly as well, but most of the time it's available on the internet, and it is getting a Blu-ray release, which of course you could probably tell us a bit more about.
Well, yeah, I mean, what I was going to say is talking about it only being broadcast once, there was a period of time when it was pretty difficult to track down Ghostwatch. Like, it was difficult to get a copy of it for a while.
Mm.
I have, like, what I watched in, and this will only be useful to our video watchers, but I couldn't even get one of the, like, a solo Blu-ray release. I've got a double feature copy with the Stone Tapes, the Nigel Neal
Oh yeah,
thing, and that's how I watched it. It was difficult to track down. Also, I'll just give a little shout out to this. I said there was some fun announcements
yeah.
coming in
That's literally what
Ghostwatch
I'm looking
space.
at right now. Yeah, I just clicked on
Yeah,
that
so
page.
there's a behind the scenes, like a feature length behind the scenes documentary about Ghostwatch called Behind the Curtain. Getting hold of one of these DVDs
Wow.
is very, very, very difficult. However, the good news is to anyone listening now, they've released it. You can just get it now on BFI Player. It doesn't matter. You don't.
Oh,
I
you
had
can.
to. I had to jump through quite a few hoops to get a copy of that documentary a while back. Now everyone can watch Behind the Curtain, and I highly recommend that you do. And
Wow,
yes, there's a Blu-ray
that's cool.
coming as well, and it's
Yeah.
just been released. We were supposed to have it in our hands already. I think there was a little bit of delay with manufacturing, so I literally got the dispatch notification this morning from 101 Films, and they've got a lovely limited edition Blu-ray that I am very excited
Yeah.
to receive. I can't remember all the special features and things in it, but anyone who wants to see it, jump over to my Instagram, and I'm sure it'll be in my stories or something because I'll be very excited when it arrives.
Really cool artwork as well. Looks incredibly green. Is it green? Very
Is it
green.
green? Yeah, sure. Why not? I can't remember. I don't have my copy yet.
It's on its way. It's been
Yeah,
dispatched.
it's on its way.
Um,
It's on its way.
so yeah, what is your relationship with Ghostwatch? Obviously, you say you watch it every Halloween. How long has that been something that you do?
Yeah, so I am not one of those people, unfortunately, though I'd love to say that I was, that watched it when it was originally broadcast. I did not see it. I'd heard about it. I'd seen clips. I think maybe someone had
Yeah.
like it taped on a VHS or something like that, and I'd seen like bits of it. But I only watched it for the first time probably like 5 or 6 years ago, something like that. And it just became an instant classic for me, and by its very nature, it's as you said, it's presented as a live broadcast that goes out at like 9 p.m. on Halloween night in 1992. And just because I'm one of those guys, I like to kind of try and replicate that. So every year I'll put it on at around
No, I
nine
love it.
on a Halloween night. And yeah, I mean, it's just one of those classics, and instantly became a tradition. And I've introduced it to a few people who hadn't seen it, and it's very difficult not to love this film.
Hmm.
But we'll get into that later.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's something. It's a cult classic amongst horror fans now, and obviously it was quite a controversial thing back in 1992. And I guess in the same vein as like War of the Worlds and the way when that radio broadcast went out, a lot of the British public, gullible, well, no, not just like it's the first thing of its kind, you know. So for it to go out, a lot of people are gonna genuinely believe it's real. And I think that's captured like the imagination of, and I think for me that does something when something initially comes out and a huge percentage of the audience thinks it might be real. The Blair Witch Project, for example, when something like that happens, it really like captures my imagination. I'm just like fascinated by the fact that it's not a case of being gullible. It's a case of like everyone is so open to these stories, and we've obviously already spoken about all stories are horror stories. Everyone's just so open to the fact that something like this could be real, because it's not presented as something where there's jumps every 5 minutes and there's like ghostly apparitions just appearing in every minute. It is open to a lot of interpretation. There's also something about the way supernatural true stories were presented by the British television in the 90s. Do you remember the program Strange But True, which was presented by Michael Aspel, I believe?
Oh gosh, I
Of
vaguely remember it. Yeah, but I couldn't be able to sum up any details about it.
I
But the,
used to
the
watch
title rings a bell.
I used to watch that every week, and like genuinely almost every week had a story which would absolutely terrify me. And it was always just like stories like, oh, this person was seen on top of a building or something, and then we found out that somebody had committed suicide there 1 year ago. They're all very similar stories like that. Ghostly apparitions, strange happenings that were kind of explained, sometimes like cryptid stories and things like that. it was it's just there's something about the way these kind of like true horror stories, supernatural horror stories, are presented in British television. There's like nothing else, and I think that's why if for as British as people have watched like the BBC growing up and watched like live broadcasts like this with telephone switchboards with people calling in.
Yeah.
We've grown up with something like that. So to see it reframed as this. It just feels, there's something about it. It feels really familiar, and it's not, and it's almost like safe. It feels kind of safe, and that when these things start happening, which are genuinely quite scary, it's a really unnerving way to
Yeah.
feel about everything happening on the screen. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the format, just as you were saying that, I guess it kind of popped into my head that I guess in a way, Ghostwatch sort of transcends just being a film and
Mm.
sort or a TV show, I guess, might be more accurate. It transcends that and becomes an event, which is
Mm.
kind of an interesting thing that not a lot of films that get spoken about can really say. Yeah, it harkens back to all sorts of things that we saw growing up. Children need, or you know, whatever. Just
Yeah.
these events where things kind of that live broadcast format where things can go wrong and you see the edges, you see the seams, you know, you see the cut of the camera to the team outside, and they're not quite ready. You know, that's what this film does so well is it captures all those little details
Mm.
of just, you know, you see the boom enter, you know, the shot, and it's all so intentional and it's all, you know, so smart about how they do it. And obviously anyone watching now and anyone seeing it for the first time now, especially someone who's not a UK resident, or even someone who is, it all the little details, the police car, the even the BBC logo is very dated now, but it still has that feeling
Yeah.
of authenticity because they did use all the authentic kind of BBC uh, vans outside, and there's a whole section in Behind the Curtain, the documentary about how everyone wanted them to make it look more like a film. You know, that's what the rest of that series that you
Yeah.
mentioned that it was originally a part of. Everyone wanted it to look as little like television as possible, but the makers of Ghostwatch kept pushing in the opposite direction. No,
Yeah.
it has to look more TV, more TV. And that is why so many people, you know, called up and bought into this
Yeah.
thing
So I think one
that
of the reasons why it's so believable as well, and I was thinking about this, is because of the personalities, the TV personalities that are involved. So it's not actors; it's Michael Parkinson, like a chat show presenter usually. Sarah Green, who was she on Live and Kicking or something like that, or some sort of
something like that.
Saturday morning TV show. Craig Charles, obviously presenter, mainly a presenter. I know he's in Red Dwarf, but also presenter of Robot Wars and various other things like that in the 90s. So these are familiar faces that we're used to seeing in this sort of setting. We're not gonna, if you do just suddenly tune in, you're not gonna immediately think, okay, this is just this is a mockumentary or this is a piece of fiction, because
Yeah,
these are the
crucially,
these are,
not non-actors. Like
yeah,
Michael Parkinson is not an actor; he
no.
is a personality. Yeah, sorry.
Exactly, yeah. So I think that's the reason. And now you mentioned a lot of people called up. Now there was a number on the screen, and when you called up, there was a message to say that this is fictional and this isn't real. So please bear that in mind before you do that. But apparently, because so many people called the number, it was the lines were jammed, so a lot of people didn't actually hear that message. So maybe there was a percentage of people who would have had their minds put at ease and be told, look, this isn't real, but they couldn't get through, so they never knew. But there is a
I
bit there's a bit of controversy about like it affecting kids, and like even there's a story about someone who committed suicide as well. Did you hear about that?
Yeah, this is mentioned
Mm.
in the documentary as well, and it's I really wanted to rewatch the documentary in time for our viewing tonight, but
Yeah.
as you know, as we spoke offline through DM, this was all a little bit by the seat of my
Nice.
pants. So I just watched it again.
Yeah.
I just watched Ghostwatch again a few hours ago. Um, yeah, that was a really kind of delicate situation that well, gosh, I don't remember in enough detail to comment on, but I know that, you know, it was definitely brought up in the documentary and uh,
Mm.
was a very, very upsetting situation to happen, obviously.
Yeah. I think I need to watch the documentary as well. I don't think I've ever seen it, so I would like to watch that and hopefully have some of those details cleared up. Because again, yeah, sensitive topic, probably not the best to comment on it. However, from that, it's obviously, yeah, it did deeply affect a lot of people who watched it. in a positive way, of course, because it probably shaped a lot of young horror fans' tastes as they grew up, especially going from that into like the Blair Witch Project, like 7 years later. But yeah, and obviously in negative ways as well. But it makes it incredibly unique. I don't know what else you could sort of describe as a reality horror pseudo documentary television film. I'm pretty sure this is the only one, right?
It does stand alone for sure. Yeah, definitely. And you know, talking about the kind of more positive aspects of it, it is still genuinely frightening to me now. Even with all the dated aspects, even obviously knowing that it is a mockumentary, that it is fictional, I still find so many moments in this film genuinely frightening. It still kind of like puts the hairs on the back of my neck
Mm.
up. It's like, so I can only imagine what it was like watching it live, like sitting, not having any idea what this thing was. Can you imagine sitting on Halloween night, not having anything to do, and changing the channel, maybe missing the first 5 minutes, and just coming into this thing, and it's Michael Parkinson. He's presenting something, and you think, um, you know, you just think, yeah, okay, they're doing some dumb
I love the thought of
Ghostwatch
like the
thing.
most cynical person watching on Halloween night and being converted. I just love the thought of that. Just like somebody sitting there going, "Oh, this is all a load of nonsense," isn't it? At the start, and then by the end, just being like trying to ring the number,
Yeah, yeah,
punches in the
exactly.
background.
And it's structured so perfectly for that casual viewer coming in. Like I watched it today, and my flatmate was here and watched it as well, and she had never seen it before, so I was able to kind of see someone
Mm.
discover this for the first time. And I think I needed to pause it at the halfway point, kind of pretty much exactly the halfway point, to grab a tea or something like that. I don't remember what it was. And I turned to her, and I said, "What do you think so far?" And I don't want to jump way ahead to where you're at around the halfway point, but nothing really has happened yet. Like the
Mm.
structure is kind of perfect in that it's sort of a little bit dull for quite a long time. And I say that as someone who loves this film. Um,
Yeah.
and she just said, "I'm intrigued," and I was like, "Yeah, that's exactly where you should be. So don't worry, it hasn't
Mm.
all kicked off yet." It's structured perfectly for that casual viewer flicking in. You get lulled into this false sense of security that yeah, this is just as dull as a live broadcast from a supposedly haunted house would be, and then you see a couple of things. Oh gosh, maybe I'm jumping way ahead, but anyone who's listening to this will have hopefully watched the film. You see then that it looks like it's a hoax. So immediately you're, oh,
Yeah.
of course it's a hoax,
Mm.
and then it takes off. The way that Stephen Volk wrote this is, and the whole creative team, I think, is kind of genius.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. In terms of like critical response, I know it's difficult to sort of judge it because again, it's not really a film, but you know, it's still got installments on pages on IMDb and stuff. So 7.5 on IMDb, 3.9 on Letterbox. On Rotten Tomatoes, it's got his 100% critic score. I think it's only got 5 reviews on there though. 75% audience score. I've got some choice reviews here from Letterbox users. Nick says it's safe to call Ghostwatch one of the most genuinely terrifying horror movies ever in history. Just imagine a truly disturbing Blair Witch Project and Ringu hybrid, and you get Ghostwatch. 4.5 stars. Cinema Void says it's the spiritual successor of 1938's War of the Worlds. Ghostwatch has British Karens screaming, "Won't somebody please think of the children?" back in 1992. Orson Welles would be proud. This is the thing. Like, I was, what was I, six in 1992, so I don't remember like the backlash, but I can imagine the newspapers and just like the general like mums and dads, if they let their kids stay up and watch this, would have been pretty intense. Um,
If I had been born a few years earlier, I'm a little bit older than you, Ben,
mm,
and I think so I would have been around about 10, and I think if I had been around about 12 or 13, I would have been
yeah.
there. I would have been watching it, but I wasn't quite there yet, so I
I
just
think I'm
missed it.
I think I'm the same as you, where like I'd seen clips of it, or maybe I, this is the kind of thing that my mum probably would be very aware of. So I'm pretty sure she would have told me about it, like as I was growing up, um, because I guess it kind of what do we have most haunted on? I can't remember what channel that was on. That was kind of like late '90s into early 2000s when that came out, wasn't it? Which was a genuine like reality show based. Well, I say genuine, uh, but reality show based on ghost sightings and a Scouse guy who was possessed by them. Derek Acora, rest in peace. So obviously this has probably inspired so many things, not just movie wise, but also like reality television wise as well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people reference this film as an influence and as an inspiration. I think a lot of people saw this at a really kind of pivotal point in their lives, and or you know, a lot of the filmmakers and horror writers and horror people out there now were at the right age, or you know, maybe just a little bit too young, or just around that kind of time, and yeah, and like I said, I didn't see it when it was broadcast, but I caught it when
Yeah.
I caught it a few years ago, and it's been something that I think about a lot. I hinted at, and I'm sorry for derailing whatever you're going to say next, but just so that I don't forget, I hinted at that I was going to say a ChillerCon story, and I'll say it very, very briefly,
Yes.
because Stephen Volk was actually at ChillerCon this year, and
Amazing.
there was a lot of great names there, and everyone was just hanging out. You know, everyone was just in the pub, so you could sort of rub elbows with some really amazing horror personalities. And, you know, I was speaking at points to Mick Garris, who, like, I was totally
Yeah.
fanboying over because, you know, he's obviously done a lot of things, but for me, Critters 2 is one of my favorites, and you know, I was speaking to him, and then there was like, you know, more recently, like M.R. Carey or Carey, I think it's how you say it, and
Mm.
um, you know, I'll forget 100 people that I spoke to, great writers and filmmakers and whatever, and I was happily chatting to them all, but Stephen Volk, I saw, and I was so kind of starstruck that I could not bring myself to go over and say hello. And I put that down to like how important this movie is to me, despite discovering it late.
Mm.
I just think it's so staggeringly good and
Mm.
important, and has influenced many people in ways that we probably don't even know. I think I wouldn't be surprised to see this come up on a lot of people's kind of best of and favorites,
Mm.
or experiences that early horror experiences that influenced them or
It's just
changed
one
the
of the
direction of their fandom.
yeah, definitely. It's like lightning in a bottle, and I'm always fascinated by these kind of things. Who like they arrive at the perfect time for the technology that's available. The the I don't want to keep saying that the audiences, but you know the willingness for the audience to play along. Whereas now, in the world of social media and all information being readily available, it's difficult. Not saying everyone's super cynical, but it's difficult to like sort of capture the imaginations of like a huge chunk of an audience. Like imagine like how many people actually tuned in and watched it on a terrestrial TV channel. So for that, it's like lightning in a bottle. It's almost like can't really be replicated. It's almost like you just have to. There's the next thing that comes along, and of course, yeah, we've obviously mentioned like the Blair Witch Project, and then yeah, so I guess War of the Worlds, Ghostwatch, Blair Witch Project, are probably like the three, which is radio, TV, internet,
Well,
and I feel like
you also mentioned something just kind of interesting there, is like when the technology sort of is there. So actually that kind of made me think, and we've mentioned it already in this chat, is Ghostwatch kind of not that dissimilar to something like Host or
mm,
Unfriended, or you know, like the
yeah,
Skype, the Zoom horror, the Skype horror. This was the TV call in horror. You know, I
yeah,
actually think that maybe there's an argument to be made that perhaps they're all in the same family somehow, which I hadn't thought
Yeah,
about until you just said that.
yeah. I think you're right, because obviously when this was broadcast, like obviously nowadays you just go on Twitter and look at the hashtag Ghostwatch and see what everyone was saying about it, and once you read that 50 people have said it's a hoax, it was filmed 6 weeks ago, this is ridiculous, not even live, you go, oh, it's not even live, and then carry on, you know.
Yeah.
So but also the Enfield I think it's slightly loosely based on the Enfield poltergeist as well, which happened like between 1977 and 79, and that it's loosely based around that, and I guess it's because, you know, two girls being haunted by sort of a malevolent poltergeist. Have you seen The Conjuring 2? And I've already mentioned The Conjuring Devil Made Me Do It, which is
No,
The Conjuring 2.
I'm a
I
terrible horror fan then, remember.
If you like Ghostwatch, I think of any of the Conjuring films, Conjuring 2 is probably worth watching because it's based on the Enfield poltergeist, so it's set in the UK.
Okay, I'll watch it.
And it's got a lot more of that. That as somebody from the UK, when things are set in the UK, like the film that scares me the most out of all movies is 28 Days Later, and the reason for that is because it's set in the UK, and it just feels like that you walk out onto your street, and then you're there, you're in it. When you're watching a movie set in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, you're like, Texas is miles away, it's never gonna happen to me. But when you see things happening literally in you know, two up, two down council houses and stuff like that, it feels incredibly close to home, and I think that is what makes it so much more effective.
Yeah, I agree with that. I used to have a little bit of I don't know, a sort of bias against British movies. This is going back a long way. I'm a smarter, more, you know, kind of level-headed guy now. But it was simply because it didn't feel exotic enough. You know, like
Yeah,
movies should be Hollywood, or they should be
yeah.
this, like, you know, Americana type thing. That was,
Escapism.
yeah, that's what movies looked like to me. And whenever I saw something that was, you know, which was rare because I that just wasn't what I was watching. But when I occasionally happened across like a British movie, or even worse, a Scottish movie, I would have been like, well, this doesn't feel like a movie at all. I can just go out and see that.
Yeah,
But actually, I understand now how good that is.
yeah,
And I've done a complete 180. I'd like to just report on that particular stance. But that was definitely something I remember thinking, that's not a
yeah.
movie. That's
I
just
think
out,
maybe
like, that's outside.
I think maybe I'm a bit of a similar mind. I think, yeah. Because I remember kind of being obviously always been a big film fan when I was a kid, but I remember seeing like I think it was the Full Monty, and just being like, "Set in where? Sheffield? I am not interested in this. What's going on?" And Full Monty, like amazing film. So I've definitely been there with you. I think like when I was younger, it was always like, I don't know, Batman and Robin. Just if this movie hasn't got Arnold Schwarzenegger and Uma Thurman in it, I'm not interested. And yeah,
Quite
now I've done
right.
a 180, and I go, that's a shit film. And Full Monty, great. Also, there's another piece of interesting information. The telephone number that was used as the call-in number at the time was the same number that they used on programs like Going Live and things like that, so that people were familiar with it. So
Mm.
almost again added to the facade of it being real. Do you remember the telephone number? It had a little tune.
It's like 081 something, but no, I don't remember the little tune.
I
Do
don't,
you remember the tune?
kind of. I feel like it's something like this. 081 811 8181, something like that. I
That was
swear,
beautiful.
I swear it's something like that. But I
Yeah.
think that's just from watching, you know, Live and Kicking and stuff. Going on. Might be different.
Yeah, they don't sing the jingle in Ghostwatch.
No, it just appears on the screen in black font. Okay, so obviously we mentioned a lot of the people who are involved in this: Michael Parkinson, um, Sarah Green, Mike Smith, Craig Charles, Gillian Bevan. But obviously there are some actresses in it. So obviously the family, the mother and two daughters, are all actresses who give, you know, good enough performances again to buy into that sort of reality element of it. And then obviously just some other people on the street who are kind of adding to the lore
Yeah, I
as
think the performances I think the performances of the central kind of family are good, Some people, I have heard people say, that it's not a good performance, but I actually think that real people on television are kind of awkward and like you know
Yeah,
what I mean? So it sort of works for me. There are some lines that kind of they stumble over or something, but I think that's what a real person would do. So it might actually be
yeah,
a exceptionally good performance. I can't remember the
yeah.
name of the actor who is the mum, but I know that she's done. I feel like she's quite an accomplished actor, if I remember correctly. But yeah, I couldn't pick anything
I've-
out.
Pamela, yeah. So Pamela Early is played by Brid Brennan, who is a Northern Irish actress. She's done a lot of theatre work apparently, so that's probably
Maybe that's what it is.
yeah. Won a lot of awards as well. So yeah, seems pretty established. Um, yeah. So that's a great performance. The kids are pretty good, but again, like it's the 90s. Like, I can't remember how kids are acting. There's a weird bit where like Sarah Green's putting the kids to bed and like kissing them goodnight, and I was like, who's this she thinks she is? She's just a TV host stepping in and playing mum.
Yeah,
That's a
there's
bit
a bit
that's a
later
bit
on
weird.
as well where she like totally manhandles one out of the house as well, and it's like that you wouldn't get that nowadays. Like
Yeah.
pushing them out that room.
There's obviously Craig Charles is like the man on the street kind of reporter who's kind of talking to everybody, uh all the witnesses essentially, who are kind of all got their story, and they add to the lore as well. Especially when the mystery starts unraveling, they
Mm.
add to the lore. They've got little interesting stories, and like genuinely quite creepy little stories as well, isn't it? Like all these little creepy little elements and details that get added.
Yeah, I don't know how exactly we're going to handle dealing with the plot and how we're going to talk through this sequentially, because it does kind of lots of little vignettes almost happen and it's kind of difficult to talk about. So I don't want to jump ahead if you've got a plan, but
I think,
there are some
yeah,
very, very creepy and dark, dark stories that are being told. The one that stands out in my head is the dog,
okay.
which is like I don't want to go into it. I'll let you dictate how we navigate this
I think
particular film.
it's like an unconventional sort of thing. So I think we'll kind of go through beat for beat, but feel free to pull anything from like the end of the film in and stuff. Like obviously we are going to be spoiling Ghostwatch throughout if you haven't seen it. First of all, if you haven't seen it, we recommend watching it. Why not on Halloween night?
Definitely.
Uh, but yeah, so obviously it's presented as a live TV broadcast. You've got Michael Parkinson who's in the studio, and he's got like a expert with him who is what's her name again? Sorry. He's got an expert with him in the studio who's kind of like, and then
I've totally
a-
forgotten her name. That's so bad.
as as you usually would have in things like this, there's a skeptic as well. So there's a skeptic side to it. There's another guy in the studio, but then there's also a American psychologist. Is it psychologist?
Dr. Lynn Pascoe. That's it.
Dr. Lynn Pascoe, yeah. And yeah, there's a guy who comes in through satellite where they're like, we've got a skeptic here who's gonna throw cold water and all of these things. Sarah Green is I guess you got like the main host actually in the house, in the haunted house, which is getting all the cameras set up. Craig Charles as well. Oh yeah, and it's her husband, Mike Smith, he's like overseeing the phone calls from the public. Wonderful hair, almost like a hair helmet he's got going on. It looks like it's got a lot of volume, but I also feel like a lot of that volume may have been achieved with hairspray. So I'm not judging one way or the other. It's like one level better than Michael Parkinson's.
Well, I've got nothing to add to the hair chat. Yeah.
Yeah, and
I'll
obviously,
just
yeah.
agree with you.
So for me, Sarah Green was like the person I was most familiar with because I grew up with her on things like Going Live and I think eventually Live and Kicking as well. So she's kind of like the nice, calming influence on the family as well. We're obviously going through quite a lot of trauma, and this is the thing: it tackles the trauma that they're going through, but it also tackles the pressure they're getting from all sides, especially people calling into the show or kind of cynics and trying to disprove a lot of what they're sort of discussing. And it goes in a lot of interesting directions. I know you obviously mentioned that it goes into a direction of there's possibly a prank being played by the girls, but yeah. So in order to they've got a sound guy and a cameraman as well, who kind of like characters on their own. Although Sarah Green's obsessed with just saying they look like other people. Says says one of
He
when
does do a great Adrian Edmondson
yeah,
impression, that guy.
he
It's
does.
really good.
I was like, he looks nothing like him, and he does the impression. I go, yeah, right, we'll let you have that one.
Yeah, I mean
So
they've populated it with this cast of characters who would be the crew on this on this live broadcast. And the nice thing about it as well is they set up very quickly where they fall on the sort of skeptic to believer
mm,
sliding scale. So Sarah Green is a believer. She has stories and is talking about experiences that she's had with the supernatural, and it has made her excited to go into the house. Whereas her real life husband is less of a believer. Parkinson himself, Michael Parkinson, comes across as a bit of a dick
yeah,
so often
he
in this
does.
because he plays the skeptic so well. Um, but I really like that aspect. And then you've obviously got Dr. Lynn Pascoe, who we now remember her name, who is obviously a believer of the highest caliber because she's kind of
Mm,
dedicated her professional life to this, and she's been working on this case for I don't know months and months and months, and is the resident expert.
yeah, she's a resident expert, and she gets a bit annoyed a few times when those skeptics are kind of really putting her to the test in terms of some of the things that are being seen and the stories being told. And she's also developed like a bit of personal relationship, you'd say. Maybe just like a connection slightly to the mother and the two daughters, where she wants to help them. She understands they've been through a lot. I think they've like contacted. I think they say they've contacted the council to get moved, but they weren't believed,
Yeah,
for
it's
one reason or
presented
another.
as sort of like this is a last ditch effort for
Yeah.
them to be believed, doing something like going on national television in this big flashy event might be
Because
seen as something else, or for what are their motivations, but they paint it quite well that no, we've got no choice because we've tried, yeah, like you say, go to the council, we've tried to go to the tabloids, and we're
They
just
went
getting
on
laughed at.
local. They went on local television as well, didn't they? And I think they said they got the backlash they got from that was essentially the same, which was
Yeah.
like, "You're just making this up." Oh yeah, for a laugh. I think that, again, inspired by the story of the Enfield Poltergeist, because I think there was a hell of a lot of that around the Enfield Poltergeist story, and I don't know if anything was proved one way or the other, but I think we're pretty sure that the girls were like it was a prank. I keep saying prank, but that's not the word I mean. What word do I mean?
Hoax.
Hoax.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, so and I've already mentioned, that's coming in the sort of journey through this event and setting up that kind of last ditch, we're desperate. We're a family who is desperate for help, kind of sets up a really nice motivation for that
Yeah.
to happen, because you do have this quite long period of time in the running time of the film, which is like a tight 90 minutes. Perfect time
Mm.
running time for any film, where not much happens, and it really sets up that as being a believable thing that maybe someone might do when nothing is happening for the cameras. And this film is populated with a lot of beautiful, I mentioned earlier, it's the little details like
Mm.
seeing the little mistakes, but also just seeing things like the way Craig Charles kind of interacts with people. So like there's the moment where he jumps out to try and scare Sarah Green, and there's kind of so much happening you don't always hear all the dialogue, but he says that he had a bet with her husband that he could get her to say essentially fuck or a four-letter
Yeah.
word on live television. And that's such an oddly specific little detail and character
Yeah.
moment that just shows how wonderfully written this is for a start, because not everyone would put that kind of care and attention into a fairly insignificant sort of on-screen relationship between
Mm.
those two as the two people on site, and it's just seeing all that, all those tiny little moments that make up this. The sum is so greater than the parts, or something like that. I just love
But
it.
she doesn't say fuck. She says beast,
She does.
which is they say a 4 letter word, but she says a 5 letter word. I think
Yeah.
she's
Well,
pretty close to
He
saying it.
doesn't win the bet. Yeah. Yeah.
No. I wonder how the family felt that prank happening. I think it does. I think it does cut back to Lynn. Is it? I keep saying Lynn. Is it the expert in the studio?
Yeah, Dr.
Yeah,
Pascal, Dr. Lynn Pascal. Yeah.
Dr. Lynn Pascoe. She's fuming. She's not impressed at all. She's like taking the piss, and they what is going on?
But again, that feels really authentic to me,
Yeah,
because I think in these big TV productions or anything like that, the actual reason why you're there, or why any of them are there, is sort of lost in the event, in
yeah,
making the show. And actually it come like, Craig Charles and a few of the others do come across as quite insensitive in a lot of the things that they do, because they're there to entertain. He's got his little quippy, like, big uh personality that he's acting up to the camera for. And then there's the people who are in the crew who are there just that's just their job. None of them want to be working nights. They don't want to be standing out in the cold all night, and they're just sitting talking, shooting the shit. Like, everyone has a different vibe on this, and it comes across as, again, this poor family isolated, like, not really being believed or not believed, just kind of indifferent. They sort of, in a way, don't matter, which is maybe why you sort of warm to Sarah Green, because it really sort of feels like she does become part of the family,
yeah.
and does kind of care about them.
She
And
also acts as like almost like a secondary mother figure, doesn't she? Like throughout. Who's the guy as well with the I mean, he's an incredibly 90s looking dude. The guy with the beard and the slick back ponytail.
oh
Um,
yeah, I don't know his name, and or but he's like, I think he's the one that's monitoring all the sensors and things, because the
yeah.
house has been wired up. I can't remember what his title is, but yeah, he's keeping an eye on the footage.
His beard like starts underneath his eyes. It's like so that you see the hairy face. It goes so far up his face. I'm just incredibly impressed by that. And I
It's a
love his.
beautiful beard.
It's a beautiful beard. He's got a lovely leather bomber jacket as well. And I think this guy. I want to spend more time with this guy.
We need a Ghostwatch spin-off just with
Oh
him,
yeah,
please.
I'd
Yeah.
watch that definitely. Um, the camera dude has also got like an infrared thing, like a predator vision thing going on the camera. Uh, which I guess at this stage you're like, okay, they're establishing this because it's gonna become uh important at some point.
And I would say that actually, although it is used later, I think they
Yeah,
missed a trick a little bit. I think there could have been some
that's true.
really, really effective scares used with this technology, but for
Yeah.
whatever
So
reason, they didn't use
what
it.
one thing that they do include, obviously, and this is again, if you've not seen it, then probably go and watch it. But there are little background appearances from the ghost known as Mr. Pipes. Now, things modern things such as like the Haunted of Hill House and the Haunted of Bly Manor, I think, has adapted this and sort of started putting little ghosties in the background and under tables and in various places like that. I pretty much never ever spot them while I'm watching. Now, maybe 2 or 3 times this time I did because I think I knew when to look for them, but I almost never spot them. And I did go and watch a YouTube video afterwards, which showed all the ghost sightings in this, and there are loads that happen like in plain sight as well. Sometimes,
Oh, I'll have to see that. You'll have to share that at some point, because I haven't watched it, and I think I'm pretty good at spotting them. And there's a couple of like glaring
mm,
ones I think that are really difficult to miss, and they honestly look a little bit ropey, a little bit hammy now. But I still appreciate the effort that's put in. But I would be very interested to see a comprehensive list, because at this stage I
yeah,
feel I've watched the movie quite a few times. But actually, um, I was watching it today, and it wasn't a ghost sighting. But I turned to my flatmate when I was watching it. I spotted something that I'd never seen before in the film, which was, at one point, the youngest of the two girls bumps her head when they're running I mean, it's
Okay.
quite deep in, it's about 2/3 into the movie, I guess, and they're running out of a room, and she slams her head against the wall,
Yeah.
and I never spotted that before, and I couldn't figure out, I didn't rewind it or anything, but I couldn't figure out, was that a mistake that made it through, or was that intentional somehow? I don't
Yeah.
know, but there is quite a lot going on, and I can imagine that watching that list, that YouTube video that you mentioned, there's probably one or two, maybe more, that I haven't ever
Yeah.
spotted.
There's one which I didn't spot, which is when Craig Charles walks up to a group of maybe like 5 people outside to talk to them. There's like a creepy person stood in the background
Oh,
of
okay.
those people. And I never
Yeah.
noticed it before. I guess it's supposed to be Pipes. So yeah, Mr. Pipes is because so initially when this starts happening, there's like loud noises, and then there's some footage in a video where the two girls are trying to go to sleep, and then there's like banging in the walls. And the reason they call the ghost Mr. Pipes is because the mum, Pamela, says it's like the heating pipes, the central heating pipes, all clunking about. And we get that now, especially like in older houses, and when the heating's coming on, you hear the pipes. And I always think about old Mr. Pipes in there, stuck in the walls, what he's doing. But also, it's not just that, it's just Pipes is also like possessing and harming the oldest daughter, Suzanne. Um, and obviously there's some links with the the basement of the house, which British houses don't really have basements, do they?
No,
I know I know exactly what you're laughing at. And
I can't believe it's taken us this long to get to this, but
I
yeah,
can't
okay.
believe it's taken us this long to get to this. So like the door under the stairs, which is like the little Harry Potter door where Harry Potter lived, they call it the glory hole. Now, I can't understand why it's called the glory hole, other than I don't know the origins of the term glory hole. I only know one meaning for it. Who knows why? But why is this called the glory hole? I feel like it's got no relevance to.
Well, the glory hole is so the a glory hole. And how many times can we say glory hole in this episode? We should have said it a lot more already. It actually is a term, a British term, an old British term for the cupboard under the stairs. So
Okay,
there are people walking around, and
makes more sense.
It happens from time to time. You'll be at some family gathering, and just by chance, some old auntie or something will be talking about the cupboard under the stairs, and they'll call it the glory hole,
Oh, is
and
that the?
all the young people will be like, "What on earth is happening right now?" It
I was at the
just
glory hole on the weekend. What?
it
Oh yeah.
just is a legit term, an outdated term, admittedly, but there are
So
still people walking around calling the cupboard under the stairs glory
so
holes.
how is it? How did it transition from that meaning to the current meaning? And look, we don't want to assume that everybody listening to this podcast is gonna know what it is, but it's we're just gonna explain what it is. It's a hole cut in something, wood, like a wall, a sheet. I don't know. um, and the main usage of it is so that a member, a male member, most
Yeah.
times, would come through that hole in order for
To be pleasured
anonymous
by
pleasuring,
anonymously, yeah.
anonymous pleasuring, um, in that way.
Often
Now,
in a toilet cubicle door, for instance, or a wall in a public
that's
toilet.
that's the most common
That's a
place for
common
one to
glory
happen.
hole.
I'm sure there are more upmarket glory holes elsewhere.
There must be, surely.
There must be. There must be. But yeah, obviously, and to us, we're kind of thinking, okay, that kind of makes sense because like there's a hole, and it's the glory of receiving or giving anonymous sex in that way makes it glory. I don't know. It feels like it kind of makes sense. I just want to know where the transition has happened from it being like that, where the cupboards under the stairs started to be used for that, and then
Ben, I wish I could help you out here, man. I don't know. I don't know when it happened.
I'll have to do some
Maybe
digging.
I think we're gonna have to.
Mm.
Maybe the first glory hole in the modern definition was through the door in a cupboard under the stairs in some famous person's house or
Or
something like that.
maybe like a toilet cubicle was given a nickname of being a glory hole because it's kind of like a similar sort of space
Oh
as
yeah,
like a
could be.
cupboard under a stairs.
Yeah, could be. Yeah.
I don't know.
But so it's one of the things, it's definitely one of the terms that dates this because everyone is running around the sweet mother, the
Mm.
kids, everyone's calling it glory hole. No one's smirking or giggling. Like it doesn't, it's one of the things that just doesn't hold up to modern viewers because it's very, very distracting to
Mm.
hear that in the middle of everything that's going
Yeah,
on.
it's kind of just confusing. I was a bit like I didn't really know what they meant the first time I saw it, but yeah, especially when they say that pipes like dwells in the house's basement. Because again, I was a bit confused because not many British houses tend to have any form of
Yeah,
basement, really,
they
do they? I mean, especially like terrace houses or as I said, like the sort of like council terrace houses. Most of it's just like an attic or like a
Yeah, I mean
loft area.
it's very rare for yeah, British House to have a basement, I agree, but they maybe explain this away by
Okay.
saying that the house is sublet. So there's this couple in the 60s who
Yes,
sublet the
of
house,
course.
and subletting can often be a rather secretive
Yeah.
thing that's done off the books. So maybe there was something like they sublet the
Mm.
basement or something like that, and it was rare to have a basement. I'm not sure, but yeah, I often you don't, I mean, this is a bit of a spoiler, but again, we've already said we're not dealing with spoilers. We never see inside the glory hole. We never see inside
No.
Pipes's lair. So I'm
Almost,
not sure.
almost, but
Yeah,
not quite.
yeah, that's true. But I guess in my head, I'm still not, and maybe it's described as a basement. I don't remember, but in my head, I'm still not sure whether I see that as a full basement
Yeah,
or
I mean,
just a cupboard under the stairs. I'm
it
not
just
sure.
says it in the plot summary here on Wikipedia. So maybe yeah, maybe it's
Yeah.
been written. Maybe it's come from like an American source as well, um, potentially. But yeah, we never see inside there. We nearly do towards the end. But no, apart from that, we just get to giggle away as they refer to the cupboard under the stairs as the glory hole. You dirty bitch. No, sorry. Uh, so yeah, so obviously for a fair chunk of this is kind of just a tension building as the host, Sarah Green, kind of uh, just what she like bobbing for apples with the kids, just chilling, having some snacks. They're watching TV at some point. Um, well, then the mum goes and does like a television, does like an interview with Michael Parkinson where they kind of ask how she's been affected by everything that's kind of happened. And the doctor, Lynn, is kind of very, very quick to say look how she this I don't know why this made me laugh. This made me laugh. I don't know why. It felt really Alan Partridge when Michael Parkinson says you can see it on her face, she's shattered. She's absolutely shattered. Look at the state of her, she looks awful. Like, God, give
This
me a chance.
this poor woman. See, it's just it's just more like insult upon insult. No one believes her. People are saying she looks shattered on national television. It's
Mm,
rough for her, man. It's rough.
yeah.
She's had a rough time. But yeah,
Uh,
we're cutting between lots of different things, and we're cutting to the phone lines as well. So we're getting
mm,
things like people calling in who are very much believers. We get people calling in who are saying uh yeah, how irresponsible it is what they're
yeah.
doing in broadcasting. There are the obvious people who they've probably had a few drinks who are phoning up and sort of getting egged on by their mates and telling dumb stories like some guy talks about a sandwich jumping off a plate or something like that. And it's just little details
The
like
sandwich just jumped off the plate right here. No, it's here. It's got me. It's
something
got
like
me with a
that.
fruit.
I didn't go that far, but they should have. But yeah,
But even like Lynn is kind of like trying to give people genuine advice, like, "Oh, you're not alone. Maybe do this, maybe do that." And so Michael Parkinson sometimes is literally just like, "Just put the kids to bed. They've had enough. Don't want it. We don't
yeah,
want to give it." He's like, "We don't want to give anyone sleepless nights." He's trying to almost throw cold water on some of it to try and calm. He doesn't want hysteria, I guess, which is
yeah,
again another thing that adds to the realism of it. Like it seems like even its own characters within it are trying to sort of dial down the sort of realism. dial up the realism, sorry, to dial down the hysteria.
Yeah, and he's constantly presented as like kind of the biggest skeptic. I think. I think Parkinson. I know there's the guy who calls in whose name completely escapes me because he's only in 2 segments. But the American guy who's supposed to,
Oh
he's like
yeah,
the head of the Skeptic Society. But even he kind of doesn't he doesn't gloat
yeah,
or
because he says
or not enjoy it in the same way that Michael Parkinson seems to.
he says I get no pleasure from being proved right or something like that, doesn't he? He's just like,
Yeah.
which is
So
kind of like they could have easily played this guy up to be like the villain of the piece, but they don't. Which
he's
is
just a different flavor. Everyone has their role. Like I say, everyone has that place on the sliding scale between skeptic and believer. And I don't really think that any two people fall on exactly the same point. I think everyone's slightly different and they're all done very intentionally. And I think, again, I'm jumping around a little bit, but it kind of is difficult not to. I
yeah,
kind of think that Michael Parkinson is set up as that as the biggest as the kind of prime skeptic, I would say, uh, so that the very last shot has more
yeah,
kind of impact. But we'll
of
get to
course,
that
yeah.
towards the end.
No, I totally agree with that. And I think it does it really well. There's a cat as well. This cat gets introduced a little while into it because I think Sarah Green even says, "I didn't even realize they had a cat." I was kind of expecting it to go down a route of, "No, we haven't got a cat. Uh,
Oh.
we haven't got a cat. What? Yeah, yeah. I was just next door. Don't worry, it's not a ghost cat. It's just next door. It's always it always comes in for that." I was kind of expecting that, but yeah, that's kind of important as well, I guess, in terms of some of the sound design. Um, some like genuinely like unnerving like sound design that we get
Oh,
like a
the
little bit later
sound
on.
design is beautiful in this, and it
Mm.
really picks up. Yeah, we haven't even got, we're still introducing. And I guess it all happens in fairly rapid succession. I think this is a really difficult movie to talk about sequentially, just because it's kind of difficult
Yeah,
to piece together because it does have this very live, very random, very much cutting from vignette to vignette and like jumping around, or not vignette, but not exactly, but you know what I mean. Um, Jumping around, but we're getting introduced to all these elements that are going to come in later. The cats being one, and
yeah.
something else which in my mind has just completely slipped out of my mind. I was going to say, so sorry. Carry on.
So one interesting thing that starts happening is that the public start calling in to talk about the footage that's shown at the top of the show, which is the girls in the bedroom, and everybody starts calling in saying, "I could see the ghost in the video. It stood by the curtain." And Lynn, Pascal, is very kind of confused by it because she's like, "I've studied this like time and time again. There's no way that there could be like a figure or a person there." And then I think she looks at it, and I think they even wheel in like like a TV monitor at some point. They say, "We've got some
Yeah.
brand new technology for you. It's an actual pen you can use to write on the screen." And she's like, "What?" And in order to circle like where, and then she's again, she plays the role here of like, yes, of course, she's just kind of like, there is a bit of a confusion. She's, again, trying to dial down this hysteria and dial down everybody going wild for shadows in the corner of the video and everything. She's like, well, it looks like the curtain, but I can understand why you've seen a person. It tends to be when we see the first thing we look for when we look at objects and shapes and stuff, we look for something familiar, which is a human face. But unfortunately not this time. Again, trying to dial down these moments and not kind of go, "What's that? What could that
Yeah.
be?"
But
Um,
we see, we as the audience of Ghostwatch get to see the great little trick, and it's kind of obvious and it's kind of dated now, but that great little trick of them in certain times when they play that footage because they rewind it and
yeah,
scrub through it. Certain times there is a ghostly figure
yeah.
standing there, and certain times there isn't. So you do have that element of like, oh wait, hold on,
You're like second
did
guessing
I see it? Yeah.
yourself. Yeah,
Very
and then
simple but very effective.
very effective. Yeah, and of course there are a few little ghostly sightings throughout these moments. That that aren't commented on by anybody in the studio or anybody in the house, because again it's just supposed to be those moments that we go, "Oh my god, did you see that?" And obviously when it was first broadcast, you couldn't have rewound it to have a look.
Yeah.
So it's usually like little passing shots when it like just spins past a room or goes from one room to the other or door to door. We get to see a tiny little snapshot of pipes. in his buttons done all the way up to his neck, and obviously that's mentioned in the description a few times as well. And then when people calling in describe the ghost, Lynn Pascoe is quite quick to say that there is, and then they play a bit of footage, which is the little girl describing what Pipes looks like, and it matches up with the descriptions that the people calling in have given. And then she's like, nobody could have known that. This piece of footage hasn't been shown to anyone or on TV at all. How's anybody known that? So already, like, something spooky is unfolding.
Yeah, we're setting up, like, that this is the whole narrative thrust of the first, like, I don't know, half to two-thirds of the movie is like setting up all the pieces
Mm-hmm.
in a fairly realistic feeling way. So if there's some kind of moments of almost downtime where really nothing's happening and it actually feels like they're trying to fill time, like it kind of does feel like that live experience that we all recognize, where maybe something hasn't quite gone right, or it's maybe not as exciting as everyone
It
expected.
feels like a live experience, but again, I feel like it's been replicated. Sorry, I was about to say it's been replicated in things, but I was about to quote a movie that actually came out before this. So it feels
Oh,
like
really?
it's in like Poltergeist. There's a bit where they
Uh,
set everything up, and there is a bit of downtime. There is that downtime where everything's kind of normal, and you are almost trying to fill the time. And then again in the first Conjuring movie, sorry to keep bringing up the Conjuring, I can't help it. In the first Conjuring movie, when they're setting up a lot of this stuff to try and sort of capture these ghosts or anything like that, there is a bit of downtime, and it's kind of like average guys, someone who's been hired to be a cameraman or someone to monitor the audio or something. There, I feel like it's a good way of establishing this tension, which is there's a period of time where things are just normal because and we could just imagine that, we'd imagine just imagine the hype of going to a haunted house and staying up all night. Like most of it would just be sitting around. Uh,
yeah.
I mean, most of it slash all of it would just be sitting around and eventually falling asleep. So again, it feels like it replicates that realism really well.
Yeah, and yeah, so it's setting up all those pieces. It feels real, but it's also introducing just enough elements of, like, maybe moments where if someone would see something,
Mm,
and then clarifying moments when there is nothing to introduce that doubt, so you're not quite sure which direction it's going to go in yet.
hmm
And then I kind of feel like I'm not jumping too far ahead now. Then we get the moment where the wind is taken out of its sails and it's all
Yeah.
revealed to be a hoax. And Michael Parkinson loves that moment. He is
Michael
so
Parkinson
happy
laps it
when
up.
that
He absolutely
happens.
laps it up. So Suzanne gets exposed as like, so it's weird because Suzanne a few times she kind of seems a bit sort of like shy and reserved, and she's kind of coming into the kitchen to get a drink and everything. But yeah, she gets exposed because she gets caught making noises. I think that the sound guy initially says he thinks he can hear some sort of scratching. And how does she get caught making the noises?
They're they do it remotely from, like, the studio, I think. So they're panning all the whole house has been wired up, and there's CCTV throughout the entire house, and they're trying to find the source of the banging. So rather than Sarah or whoever going upstairs, they just tell her to wait, and they pan because they're not sure if it's going to be safe or whatever. So they pan
Yeah.
around, and then there's a little sort of blind spot that's not been visible up until this point by the cameras. But when they move it, they see that she's just hammering against the pipes. She's just trying to make a spectacle. She's trying to give them what she thinks everyone wants, and that's the sort of motivation that I was talking about earlier, which is, like, this thing, this desperate family, and then nothing decent, nothing good or cinematic or worthy of this TV event has been happening. So the the
Yeah.
the the elder daughter does something
So
and is found out.
she gets found out. I was about to say something incredibly Bristolian then. I don't know.
Oh, what were
I
you
don't
gonna
know.
say?
She gets gripped, which is incredibly Bristolian for gets caught, gets found out.
Oh, I like
And
that.
she gets gripped. Yeah. She gets gripped, right? Uh, and yeah, she gets obviously defensive as you would and upset, and she kind of goes, "This is what you wanted," and everything. And then Lynn in the studio says that it's very common in terms of like these supernatural things. It's a process that goes through. Sometimes these witnesses do start to fake things when things die down a bit, or when there's an audience around, because they're so keen to kind of confirm their story, which is true. They want to confirm their story so much that when things, because ghosts sometimes don't play ball, and when you're after that proof, they won't give it to you. So yeah, apparently it's very common within something like that. So she's very upset, of course. Did they look at the evidence of her with like scratches on her face as well?
Oh gosh, when did the scratches on her face come in? I think
So
it's a little bit after this, because this is the
yeah.
point really where I kind of feel like, yeah, the wind's been like I said earlier, the wind's been taken out of the sails here, because now all the doubt has been, well, proven. It's a hoax, and everyone's convinced of it, apart from the family and apart from Lynn Pascoe. And but it's also the turning point for me where things really start to kick off, I think, because everything starts to happen
Mm,
now, and we're
yeah.
sort of in the end game towards the full blown, well,
Mm.
finale, which we'll get to in a
Finale, yeah.
sec.
So obviously we do go back to the studio with Michael Parkinson, like happy that it's a, well, not happy that it's a hoax, but he's like, look, this is what it was all along. What a waste of my time. I'll stick in my pay packet. And that's when we get the guy from America as well, who's like not gloating. He's like, well, there we go. There's always an explanation. That's what should have happened. But it's almost like it lulls you into this false sense of it being a hoax. And that's when it kind of kicks off. Suzanne, it's almost like what Pipes needed to show himself, essentially, in so many ways. So he seems to like possess Suzanne because she starts speaking in that demonic voice. Is that the scratches happen first, and then
Yeah. I'm not sure if this is covered or not, whether or not the scratches are, because it's mentioned that it might be her fingernails, which she doesn't have. But I think it's like
yeah,
cat scratches, right? It's supposed to be cat scratches. I think that's what's
yeah,
going on in my head. I'm not sure if that's ever actually stated, but yeah, she is under the covers at some point. There's a few things that happen, and I can't remember the exact blow by blow of how we go from. Well, I actually think that, yeah, what you said, she's obviously very upset to have been discovered, and then
mm,
her mum kind of takes her to bed, and we go back to the bedroom quite soon after. I think it's after the cut back to the studio that you described, and
mm-hmm.
she's sort of covered up by the duvet, and they peel it back, and she is, yeah, her face is covered in all these cat
Yeah.
scratches,
And I think
and
Michael Parkinson even says, "Oh, she's obviously done it with her fingernails," and then her mum grabs her hand and says, "What bloody fingernails? They're
exactly.
freshly trimmed all the way down to the nubs."
But and yeah, and this is when inexplicable things start happening and start escalating, and the obvious response is to try and get the kids out. And this is the bit where I was joking earlier that, Sarah sort of like just kind of grabs one of the kids, like, no,
Get
you're
out.
out. But actually, there's a moment where they don't want to leave. In
Yeah.
fact, the younger of the two starts kind of talking to Pipes. She claims that he's in the room with them. We don't see him, but everyone talks about how cold it is in the room, and
Mm.
how the elder daughter is burning up with a fever, and it's getting pretty creepy at this point, and everyone's a little bit uncertain about what's happening.
What is it that something ended up broken, and they talk about the fact it was examined to see how it broke, and it wasn't from like force, but it was from
It
temperature
was,
change. Can't remember
yeah,
exactly what that was.
that was stuff that was actually in the studio. So that was earlier on, and
Yeah,
Dr.
yeah,
They were that was in just one of the segments. That
yeah.
was almost in one of the filling time segments.
Because this is the crazy thing. Is like it doesn't just seem to be affecting. This is what's so good about this. It doesn't seem to just be affecting the house and the people within the house. It's affecting the studio, and it's also like affecting people like nationwide,
Yeah,
which is like crazy, which is like kind of nuts, and also adds to the scariness of it, because not only are people, that must have been so scary from watching it, because not only is it like, okay, like it's on TV, it's fine, I'm away from it, I'm not experiencing it myself. No, it's affecting people who are watching it as well, which is freaky.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to jump ahead, but I guess we're talking about the finale now. But that is
Mm,
essentially explained when Dr. Lynn Pascoe sort of realizes by broadcasting it, by doing what they've done tonight, they've actually inadvertently created a nationwide seance. Like
yeah,
she kind of says that as things are just going disastrously wrong. So yeah, like the sort of power of pipes, if you like, has manifested to such a degree now because he's kind of
yeah.
like a ghost in the machine almost. He like gets into the studio.
And it couldn't be a worse ghost as well because his background is slowly pieced together by interviews with they interview a neighbor who mentioned somebody called Mother Seddons, who was like a it says Victorian baby farmer here.
Yeah,
Uh
that seems to be like a childminder, but it's a really odd way of putting it. I don't know
yeah, lots of
why
terms.
it's called baby farmer. But
But
yeah,
apparently she murdered children and it was like a local bogeyman that like people sort of talk about. Um And when did we hear the story about the dog as well? When it's again when Craig Charles is interviewing some of the locals, isn't it?
yeah. This is why it's so difficult to talk about this because
Mm,
I can't remember exactly where all these segments happen, but I remember the segments. Um, the Yeah, the dog moment is for me one of the darker ones because it seems
yeah,
to just be this really normal interview by like what we would see 1,000 times on the news. Like, the news presenter is out there on the street catching unawares people asking them a question, and it's sort of got that vibe. Craig Charles is out there, but and he's got these two mums, and they're just like
yeah,
working class mums, and they're just talking away. But the stories that they tell about things that are happening, it's about like 5-year-old kids getting knifed in the street, and this is a sweet little
yeah.
suburban cul-de-sac, and the stories that they're telling are really horrible. And then the one
Mm,
that for me is one of the darkest ones is someone butchered a dog in the play park, and then
mm.
that's bad enough. Like, does the dog die in a film? Well, that's immediately going to turn off a whole subsection of the audience. We don't see the dog, obviously; it's just told. But then they add the really gruesome detail that it was pregnant, and then that they had spread the
Oh yeah,
fetuses all over the park. And I was just like, oh, this was broadcast on BBC One,
yeah.
and it's just baffling how this got. It's moments like that where you sort of realize, oh, maybe I understand why it was only ever broadcast once because this is really dark stuff.
It's just those extra little sort of details, those really dark, really gruesome, bizarre details as well that kind of add to the mythology of this. There's a story as well about the guy. Sorry, you might need to fill me in on this. The guy who calls up and he talks about a ghost with the saliva in the mackerel and the and the
Yeah,
saliva on his shoes.
yeah, that's weird as well. There's actually a few details that even after my many um viewings, I still don't actually know if they pay off or if they're just red herrings or what.
Mm,
That is one of them. Yeah, just a guy talking about how this entity, this ghost, was basically spitting on his fish and then talking about how he
oh, you
like
spit on
spread
my fish.
excrement on the
Oh yeah.
bathroom walls and stuff like that, and it's really odd, and I don't know if it's related. And there's another moment which I catch every time I watch it, and I keep forgetting to look into it a little bit more, but I saw it again tonight when the in the call-in center, someone phones in and they ask them, oh, you hung up before you could tell us your name, please call us back. And it's
Oh
this
yeah.
little plea to get this person to call back. Even now, I've watched this film I don't know how many times. I don't think that's ever paid off.
No.
I think that's just a random little thing that
But again, are we
happens.
supposed to think that that person they haven't called back because they're hurt or because they've been possessed or something like that?
Yeah,
Um,
maybe, yeah.
I just think all these little weird, like really unconventional little stories and moments and little drip fed bits of lore towards this haunting make it feel really strange because they could have said, oh, the room got cold, oh, then there was a face, or I heard a voice, or stuff like that, which is just like standard haunting fare. But the fact that they add all these weird little stories, word of mouth stories, and word of mouth accounts of hauntings just makes it feel real.
This is why Stephen Volk has done something really very special with this. It's an
Yeah,
amazing piece of horror cinema. It's
yeah.
really is. And I don't want to jump ahead. Everyone knows that my rating of this film is going to be high. It really is staggeringly
Mm.
kind of impressive and important.
So there's an anonymous call from Pipes's probation officer as well. He says, I don't want to give my name out, but he says I was a man called Raymond Tunstall's probation officer.
Which I think actually kind of identifies him a little bit anyway. Like, okay, well,
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah,
haven't
yeah.
given us your name, but you were this guy's probation officer. It's not going to take.
It's not going to
Uh...
be hard to find out. I'm not going to give you my name, right? But I'll give you my address, my national insurance number, and I've taken a picture of my passport. I'll send that over as well. But I'm not going to give you my name. Uh, and yeah, so Raymond Tunstall, and then he kind of tells the story of this guy. So yeah, there was a couple who lived in this house, and they were renting a room, sort of illegally, I guess, because I guess it's like a council house, so you can't really like sublet a room to somebody. I think that's kind of the thing they're getting at there, isn't it? And that he had gone to prison based on a few things like molestation, some sort of assault, a couple of other things that aren't very pleasant. And it says here he's a disturbed paedophile who believed he was possessed by the spirit of that mother Seddons, who
The
in
baby
herself
farmer. Yeah.
baby farmer, yeah. And they hung himself in the glory hole. This is a weird little detail. How would the probation officer know that? I mean, I don't know. I suppose he would. Where did he hang himself? Oh, in that house, I think. Yeah, but where? In the glory. He was in the glory hole, mate. And this is key as well. His body was eaten by cats.
Yeah.
Or like chewed up by cats. And I guess is that why it kind of makes sense that the scratch marks on her are from cats, and there's a
I
lot of
feel like the
cat
scratch
noises as
marks.
well.
Yeah, we haven't, but we actually didn't speak about that. But there were various cat noises and stuff like that, which again, just that sound design, although it's really the sort of
Again,
warped.
so it's creepy
Uh,
because it's almost supposed to think that like there are cat ghosts as well that kind of like go alongside
I guess
Pipes.
there
Like
would be.
Pipes is that these cats ate him. Maybe I don't know. Whenever they died, and he's like, right, that's it. Who are those cats that ate me? You're stuck with me in the afterlife now, you bastards.
Yeah, yeah. So just dark backstory to what's going on and what's actually happening here. And yeah, this is the kind of reveal, and it's all done quite organically because obviously Dr. Pascal, the family, a lot of people don't know this story. This is being pieced together
Yeah.
because of the broadcast and because of the Collins, and it's done in a very kind of neat way where it sort of explains all these little random threads and weird moments sort of come together. And we get this idea of who he is, and it's kind of at this point when he is revealed that that Pipe sort of is at the height of his power. This is when everything, I said earlier when it starts to kick off after the hoax is revealed, but it's kind of when he's named
Yeah.
that shit really hits the fan.
If
And
you
this is
utter his
maybe
name,
the thing that, this is maybe just the utterance of his name
it's
is,
been broadcast like across the country as well to
yeah.
whoever's watching. So trying to say it's given him all this power. And it's not long after this, Suzanne like disappears, doesn't she? And then they can hear her from within the
The
glory
glory
hole.
hole. Yes.
Are you in the glory hole? Yeah, I am, but I will not tell you I am because that take away the anonymous nature of it. But
Yeah.
can
The
you
fun is
please?
that you don't know. Uh,
Exactly. Um, so they
yeah,
like
she gets locked in there and they have to start prizing her out. And there's quite a lot of chaotic stuff going on at the moment, and people are running around, and we're actually not sure kind of where everything is. It's that wonderful almost found footage element, or the mockumentary element, that we are with the camera guy,
we're
and
in there in the chaos. So
yeah.
just as they pry open the door, there's a tiny little sliver of Pipes's face as they pry open the door, because it kind of like shows him, and then they quickly just spin around because a mirror smashes on the sound guy's head. It's a sound guy, isn't it? I think it's a sound guy.
Yeah,
Sound guy,
it's
or the
Adrian
cameraman?
Edmondson.
Adrian Edmondson himself. Adrian, are you all right? Uh, uh, yeah, and obviously, Sarah runs over to make sure he's okay. He's just bleeding and KO'd, isn't he? So probably not.
Yeah, and
Um,
we sort of lose contact with the inside of the house now. So
yeah.
it gets to this sort of fever pitch of like things going on. Obviously, our guy's been knocked out. He's bleeding pretty badly, and it sort of cuts back to the studio. No one's entirely sure what's happening. The narrative is that they're trying to reestablish contact. We even go back to the street, which I think is quite an interesting detail. We go back to Craig Charles and the guy that we want
Yeah.
to do the spin-off with on the street. And as far as they're concerned, nothing weird is
Yeah.
happening. So we know that
Everything seems
inside the
fine.
house, it's gone crazy, but outside it's just business as usual. But we reestablish contact inside the house relatively quickly, and perhaps maybe a little bit too quickly, because we go back to the house and no one has quite spoken to anyone yet, but everyone is sitting in there quite happily playing cards or doing something along those lines in the lounge again. It
Yeah.
actually very closely resembles something that we saw them do earlier,
Earlier,
uh,
yeah.
and that's intentional, because after a brief amount of time, the doctor, Pasco, she realizes that what they're seeing on the screen is wrong. There's
They did the thing. They did the thing from Speed. Remember when
oh yeah, yeah, yes, you're right.
when Pipes is ahead of his time. This is before Speed, but he knows that there's a little trick you can do where you can just loop a little bit of video, and even Dennis Hopper won't realize until he. It's just Keanu Reeves and well, what's her name? Who's driving the bus?
Sandra Bullock.
Sandra Bullock. It's just he's got his hand on her like that, and there's just a little movement, and he goes, "Right, move me over." So basically, Pipes does that, does a little loopage, does a little supernatural video loop. Realizes that, yeah, this is from, oh my god, this is from earlier in the broadcast. And I think this is the point where you already mentioned, but this is the point where she says that Pipes is using the broadcast to do a nationwide seance circle. He's invading people's homes. And
Yep.
then I think it does go back to the live broadcast. As everyone like is getting out of the house, everyone's like getting evacuated. Everyone except for Sarah and the mum. Is it the mum?
I think it's the eldest daughter, if I remember
Eldest daughter,
correctly.
yeah, that's right. Attempting to rescue Suzanne. And the cameraman is sort of like saying to Sarah, don't go in there, don't go in there. But she looks like she gets dragged through the cellar door, the glory hole door,
The glory hole,
which then slams shut. And then, yeah, loads of mad shit starts happening in the studio. Lights are exploding.
This is
Everybody's
one of my
like running
favorite.
away.
This
Yeah.
is one of my favorite Pipes sightings. He's standing up in the rafters,
Yeah.
where the lights are exploding, and he almost looks like a. You see it so briefly, and I've never paused it to look at it, so maybe I'm totally wrong. But I always think he looks a bit like a Cenobite up there, like
Yeah.
a
I
sort
was
of
just about to
Hellraiser
say
thing.
that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Because he almost looks like, it doesn't quite seem like a face, does it? It kind of almost looks like somebody who's in a state of they've been injured, and they kind of look a bit like really undead,
yeah.
ghosty. But no, I've never paused at that moment either. But also, like, we can't really see what he's wearing so much. I know we've had like the button up sort of thing that's sort of described, but it does almost look like he's wearing some sort of like apron,
Yeah,
something weird like that.
yeah. Pipes has such sights to show us.
He's got such sights to show everybody who's watching BBC One at this particular moment. Imagine it this time though, if you'd like, I don't know, didn't have a TV in 1992, which I'm sure a lot of people didn't. What's that? You'd go out the next day. What's going on here then? Lots of people are dead or possessed, and a ghost is like I don't know, like the king of the UK now, just Just
Everyone's
go.
covered in cat scratches.
Everyone's covered in cat scratches. The glory holes. Everyone's locked in their glory holes. Oh, I ain't got a TV. BBC One. Nah, don't pay my TV license. I'm afraid. Pipes can't get you.
It's the only way to be safe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And yeah, so it kind of ends with Pipes essentially taking over the studio. We see Michael Parkinson flee, but then when it cuts back to this is effective, isn't it? When clearly Michael Parkinson's been
This is
possessed.
good.
The ultimate skeptic as well.
Yeah, this is a nice moment because and we've glossed over all the kind of amazing sound design. Like this last 5-10 minutes, the sound is just wonderful and like horrible and will kind of make you sort of cringe and it's like
Yeah.
screams and warped voices and like slow down and horrible things and cats and like horrible like just stuff that you don't even recognize as human or whatever anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah, right at the end, the studio is in darkness. There's one camera still running. It's at an odd angle. It's not really focused properly on anything. And
Mm.
we just see Parkinson walking around, and then he realizes that the auto cue is still running on this camera, and he starts to read it, and we realize very quickly that it's probably Pipes'
Mm.
words because he starts to say a sort of nursery rhyme, and then his
Mm.
voice turns into that weird possessed voice that we've been hearing. So yeah, like the Parkinson becomes Pipes essentially, and it cuts to black, and
I
it's a
am
perfect
Pipes.
ending. Yeah, it's a perfect ending.
I would have let that. They should have done like a sort of emergency broadcast thing at the end as well,
Oh yeah.
just to really fuck with the British public, you know.
There is one bit about this ending that sort of doesn't work for me, which is when like high winds suddenly blow through the studio, which
Oh yeah.
just it feels a little bit silly to me. But it's a very small criticism of an otherwise pretty perfect sequence. Yeah,
One step too far. Something is like feels quite unconventional in terms of the ghostly stuff. Yeah, maybe just one step too far, but still, you know, I think it's still effective. And obviously
definitely.
90, it's like 30. It's quite insane that it's 30 years old as well. Um, so yeah, that is Ghostwatch. The
It's-
Yeah, so I'm a little bit ashamed of myself because I'm usually not the one who does the name game. Andy's usually much more on it than me. His examples are much better than mine. However, I'm going to attempt a couple of these, so I apologize in advance, not just to you, John Crinan, but also to the listeners because God knows where this is going to go.
well, okay,
Okay,
I'm
okay.
ready.
Um, I don't even know where to start.
I'm never
Uh,
good at the name game. When I listen, because as you know, I'm a fan, I'm a listener, and I'm always terrible at it. And I've never been good when we've played it on the show either. But go ahead, let's see if I
Okay.
can do this.
Well, my clues may be even worse, so let's try. The next few minutes could be very tough if you're listening. So okay, it's during a reality horror pseudo-documentary television film. Just before going on air, Michael Parkinson decides to have a lovely cooked bread snack. But what seems to happen is some crumbs seem to fall around his genital area, and it's caught up on the camera. People realize that he's obviously had a couple of slices of something before going on air.
I believe it's Toast Watch.
It's nearly Toast Watch. The area of where the crumbs are is
Oh,
also key. Is
oh,
genital
oh,
area.
Toast Crotch. Sorry.
Toast crotch.
Yeah. Okay.
Correct.
Sorry. Okay. I'm on board now. Okay. Got you.
Toast. Yeah. Okay. I told you it was gonna be bad. Um.
I'm
So
just impressed. I got it.
during a reality horror pseudo documentary television film, we follow a man who goes around the country eating as many Sunday dinners as he can and keeping a tally of them.
Keeping a tally of them. Okay, it's roast.
Yeah. Maybe
Hold on.
he's keeping a tally of them on a bedpost as well. That's weird.
What? Oh, roast notch. Is that
Roast
it?
roast notch, correct? Yeah, he's like, I've had 25 roast dinners just this month. Oh, he has them on a Sunday, so it's only 4.
Oh man, I
Okay,
could go a
and
roast dinner
finally,
right now.
oh
Okay.
yes, 10 to 11 p.m. roast dinner. Let's
Oh
go
geez,
for it.
10 to 11 already. My gosh.
I've only got one more for you as well.
Do it.
During a reality horror pseudo-documentary television film, we go into the house of a woman who claims there's a haunting. She's got a couple of daughters in there as well. However, when the TV crew arrive, she doesn't offer them a drink. She doesn't offer them a place to sit down. She's terrible at having guests.
Oh man. Host
Yeah,
is the first one's host, but she's a bad host, so it would
she's a
be
bad host.
host.
She's got something wrong. She's screwed it right up. She screwed up being a host.
Oh, this is beautiful, Ben. Host botch.
Host botch. Correct. That is
Oh, that's
that's
your finest work.
it's my
Host
finest
botch.
work.
I love it.
I've never done better than that. Who knows if Andy Conduit Turner's that's 3 out of 3, but who knows if Andy Conduit Turner's name game would have been any better.
Oh
Host
man.
botch. She is a bit rude, actually. I think that at one point Sarah Green goes, "Oh, I'm gonna go make a coffee," and I'm like, "What? Why
Wait
is
a
she making a
second.
coffee?" It's always weird making a coffee in someone else's house. Where are the
I
mugs? Where's the spoon? Oh no, they've only yeah.
I think it's
So
a bit presumptuous how she just she just chucks her coat over the banister when she walks in right at the start, and I'm like, you don't do that in someone's house. That's not cool.
no,
She just
just
walks in, takes it off,
keep
shrugs off her coat over the banister into the
Sarah
kitchen.
Green.
It's a
Sarah
bit
Green, you're
too familiar.
so rude. Yeah, it's a
Mm.
bit too familiar. And then she's all pally with the kids. Come on, don't believe it.
She's the real
Uh,
villain.
she's the real villain of the piece. Forget pipes. Okay, so what we need to do now is rate Ghostwatch. Rate good or rate bad from A to F. Where you're sitting on this? I know you're feeling pretty.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, right, whenever I come on the show, it's generally, not always, but generally for a film that I'm a big fan of. So I think I always skew your results because I'm always coming on talking about some of my favorite movies. And I love this movie, as has been very clear throughout. I find the A to F quite a difficult thing to navigate. If I was
Mm,
rating this on Letterboxd, which I actually have stopped rating movies, I now just mark the movies that I like because I realize that one 3-star movie is a very different to another 3-star movie, and it seems like such a crude way to do it.
mm,
But if I was rating it on something like Letterboxd, I would give it 5 stars. Like Ghostwatch is a 5 stars, but how does that translate? It's not an A plus. Like so 5 stars and A plus are not the same thing. But is it as low as an A? It's somewhere between an A minus and an A. I
mm.
don't know. I feel like I'm gonna have to just say a straight A, which is a really strong score. I really,
Mm.
really love this movie.
I think 5 stars probably translates to an A or an A plus. I think. I
Yeah.
think.
Well,
Yeah,
it must do
I would
because it's
say.
like perfect, right? You can't go any higher on Letterboxd, but
Yeah,
I don't think I'm ready to say A plus. It's
A
an
plus.
it's an A. It's a
Mm.
wonderful masterpiece. But I
Yeah,
do have a couple of little things like
yeah.
I would change.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? Like it is masterful in a way. Some things have aged, yes. Maybe I've not got like the nostalgic. Even though you said you only saw it like 6 years ago or something, like it's not something that I watch every single year. This is probably like the third time maybe I've seen it. I've probably only the second time I've seen it all the way through. I think before I'd seen clips and bits and bobs, and I watched it in full probably only a couple of years ago. And then so I mean, again, I completely understand why it's a cult movie slash TV film. I completely understand that and respect it. And watching it again and again, talking it through at such great detail, with yourself. And I feel like I say this every single week, but when you chat about something to great detail, no matter how bad it was, you always end up appreciating it just a little bit more than perhaps you did the first time around, because you kind of, especially when you're talking about things that you really enjoyed about it. And I'd probably go for a B plus. I'd be willing to go for an A minus I'm not sure what would nudge me over to an A minus. I really like the fact that it's gained such traction as being like a cult favorite, and the fact that we're getting a Blu-ray release, B it's getting screened at like film festivals and stuff, and people are seeing it on the big screen. I think that's incredibly exciting. Um, that's something that could have just ended up being like a bit of a dud, you know, if it was in different hands. It could have
Yeah.
just been like a complete reproduction of something like that eventually became Most Haunted, you know, in the end, and you know, floating chairs and very silly things, and it could have been really over the top. I think it was handled really well. So I think I'd go for a. And yeah, we've already mentioned the fact that it's very, very British. It's got a lot of familiar British faces, and it just seems to capture that sort of like light entertainment / live TV of the early 90s, which had a very specific sort of look and feel and flavor. It captures that really, really well. So I think I'll just go for a B minus. Sorry, a B plus. Don't want to drop. What am I doing? A B plus. I think is fair. And maybe it'll start. Maybe it'll find its way onto my regular Halloween watching from now on, and maybe I'll become more fond of it.
It's solid scores all around, I would say.
Yeah. And if you've never seen it before, I highly recommend watching it. But also, if you're a fan of, you know, those videos which say all of the ghostly spots that you missed throughout, watch one of those videos on YouTube as well, because that always opens your eyes to other things. Like, okay, there are layers to this. There are layers to it, and it's a very well made piece of television.
I would put it up there amongst the very, very high, like the titans of horror cinema. I think it's up there with the best
Oh
that
wow,
our
okay.
genre has to offer. I think it has an importance beyond just how good it is. It's a very, very, very good piece of work.
Mm. And it really does sort of like capture that the time period as well. And we've already mentioned about like the technology available, but yeah, you've got War of the Worlds, Ghostwatch, Blair Witch Project, and then possibly Host as being like the four horsemen of the tech
Oh
horror
gosh.
horror technology apocalypse, where it kind of like again, it really just captures a particular time in horror cinema and like makes the most of what's available to it as well.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think I'm gonna go and check out the documentary Ghostwatch Behind the Curtains just so I can find out a little bit more from that. I'm very interested to see it.
it's a good watch. Yep. I recommend. I want to rewatch it again, actually. It's been a little while since I've watched that last, but it's
Yeah.
about as long. It's feature length, so it's a nice little double bill.
Oh yeah, perfect double bill. I will go and check it out. Okay, thank you very much for joining us again, John. This has been a hell of a lot of fun. Where can our listeners keep up to speed with, you know, short films you're making, things you're writing,
Uh,
horror films you're watching?
yeah. I mean, everything's accessible through johncrinan.com, which is JOHNCRINAN. And I'm also at John Crinan on Twitter and Instagram. I'm so tired. I don't know if I spelt my name correctly there, but I think I did. You'll find it. Then I'll put it in the show notes. And and yeah, I'm kind of like, I guess I'm kind of more active on Instagram, but I'm starting to rediscover my love for Twitter actually.
Mm,
I kind of
okay.
flipped, and I'm starting to post a little bit more on Twitter. So come over and find me on Twitter and encourage me to post more on there. But
Yeah,
yeah, that's me at John Crinan
awesome.
on those two
Come
things.
on over. Okay. That's well, I was about to say what next week is, but I don't think we've officially put it out there yet. So November episodes, we've got a few confirmed with a few guests confirmed as well. I won't list all the guests. However, films we'll be covering include Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, will be next week. We'll be covering Carrie 2, The Rage. We'll be covering Killer Clowns from Outer Space,
Oh,
The Last House on the Left, and Tetsuo the Iron Man.
oh
Um,
wow! Next month's
so
a good month.
So 5 episodes and also quite a cross section there of movies, genres, and yeah, we've got loads of interesting guests lined up. We'll be putting out the details of that on socials probably on the 1st of November, so keep an eye out for that. Yes. So
Beautiful. As a fan,
thank
I'm
you.
excited about Tetsuo for sure. That's gonna be amazing. That's gonna be a good episode.
Yeah, that was just a random little choice that we put out there based on the guests we're having on. So yeah. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, become a patron over at patreon.com/horror hangout. Thanks to our patrons, including John Crinan, patron against his will, Ben Scaife, Stephen Christopher, Laura Kendrick, Toby Miller, Lane Spencer, Ollie Child, Leslie Carlo, Julia Bilger, Nick Spill, Rob Parker, brand new patron, Troy Bursch,
Oh,
long
Troy.
time listener of the show, and guy who always interacts with us on social media, always giving us loads of interesting thoughts and sharing loads of cool stuff with us. Thanks, Troy. And Pazuzu. Forgot to include Pazuzu. Don't do that. Yeah, so there we go. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Thanks for Taj Easton for our theme music. Thanks to Acast for hosting the show. Please consider giving us a rating or review. Head over to Facebook group Horror Hangout Board of Advisors for more. We're on Twitter at horror_hangout_, and we're on Instagram at Horror Hangout Podcast. Whew, there we go. And thanks again, John. It's been an absolute pleasure. Please join us on the show more regularly because it's always a good time.
Always happy to join you. Thank you for having me. It's been wonderful.
No problem. I'll see you very soon. Take care now and happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween, everyone.